Right, good evening everybody. Emergency evacuation procedure. I don't think we've anybody here that hasn't been here so many times they could tell us the evacuation procedure, possibly still in their sleep. It's the 29th of July Policy and Resources meeting. Apologies for a little late, it's just the incompetence of the chair has produced that lateness, nothing more and nothing less. You see, until you turned up, Di, I was able to say, well, we'll wait for Di a little longer. Now I've got to admit my own incompetence. Apologies for absence. Have we got any, Simon?
We've got apologies from Councillor Burr and Councillor Paul Andrews is substituting.
Thank you. Good evening, Paul. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No, there doesn't appear to be any of those. Minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of June. Anybody want to, I'll move them as they stand, but anybody want to comment on them, move any amendments, question any of it? It was, like it's probably irrelevant, but it's something to do with you, Keane. It said something about raised an email or something. I can't remember where it was. Yes, Councillor Duncan raised an email setting out the planned approach to setting up a joint works group. That doesn't quite make sense to me reading it now. I'm sure it made sense at the time. Can you remember what it was?
Which page is that, sorry? Oh, I see now.
Chair's announcement, 15, page 5. It's only a word or a comma or something that's missing. But it doesn't make sense to me now, and it did make sense to us at the time.
There was an email circulated to group leaders, I believe, about the joint works group. So I raised it.
Right, so that needs to be, Councillor Duncan raised an email that had been issued to group leaders setting out, etc. Could we amend that to that? Just so that somebody reading it next week, let alone next year, will be able to understand what it's about. Thanks, King. Anybody else with any comments, bits and pieces to go on the minutes? Or shall I move them? I'll move the minutes. Have I got a seconder? Go on then. Right. Standing order for seconding. That'll do. Right. Those in favour, I presume we're showing of hands as usual. Yeah. Those against? And one abstention. Two abstentions, yes, Paul, of course.
So that's 8 votes for, no votes against, and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. Chair's announcements. On my own copy of the paperwork, which is at home, I have a couple of notes down there, and my brain is racing around trying to pick up what those were. If you don't mind, I'll come back to 5 later if whatever it was occurs, and we haven't done it in the minutes. Item 6, Policy and Resources forward plan. I think it would be fair to say that I have had entertainment with the forward plan over the last month. And I'm looking to see if we can find a way and this is not a criticism of everybody, it just doesn't quite fit and work together somehow between officers doing reports, what's on here, the Strategic Management Board, and the chair. And it's fallen down in all sorts of places all over the time. So we need to find a system of looking to try and make it work. And I'm proposing as a principle that we look at it for the meeting after next. So at the beginning of September, when we're putting together, I think it's the 3rd, we're putting together the agenda for the end of September, we confirm that what is on the forward plan for the next meeting in November is happening as it says on the forward plan. And that'll just tighten it in a little bit. So I can't do that now, because we would have needed to have done it at the beginning of July for the end of September one, and we didn't. So I'm going to run through the items that are on there and ask the officers to confirm that as far as they know, it is still happening and it's still likely to be there, etc. And then immediately you go, wouldn't it be helpful if they were numbered? And that's occurred to me now, so it's all part of the building it up. So, number 1, economic development, climate change and environment projects update. Philip?
Yes, Chair, that still will be available for September.
And it says here, yearly. I believe that is to come to P&R every 6 months.
I think that's correct, Chair, and I think it should be on the full plan again later in the year as 6 monthly updates.
Yes, but it says here that it's yearly. Is what so it needs something changing for that. In other words, the heading needs to be annual, yearly, or timescale, or whatever. Economic Development and Business Partnerships A64 update. Philip is nodding again. That's number 2. Housing Services, White Rose Home Improvements. That's, as far as I know, is happening. Number 3. Economic Development Business Partnerships, Car Parking Strategy. That should be coming to there. Good. Policy and Resources, Air Quality Steering Group. And that came from full council, and as far as you know, that's going to that meeting.
Should I come to the front, Chair?
Yeah, well, I'll grab a microphone or both, whichever. I don't think you've got the whole meeting, but you've got a very good start.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. With regard to the air quality one, it's officers' aspirations that it comes in September, but we are very much dependent on having a meaningful conversation with NYCC that we're following up on at the moment. So it's our intention, but it is slightly outside our gift, unfortunately. So perhaps if you like, a strong intention.
Yeah, that's fine, as long as we know where we are with. Human Resources and Organisation and Development, Rydale District Annual Report. That was to be coming in July and then didn't. Is that now coming in September?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not able to comment on that with it being a HR report. I don't know if any of my colleagues who are down in remotely can help with that at all.
I can speak on that one. Chair, yes, it is due to come in September. It's Emma, by the way.
Ah, right. Lovely. Thanks, Emma. So sorry missing the fact that did I miss that? It says LB here.
Sorry, that's Lynn Bay's.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And you're responsible for. Thanks, Emma. That's tidied that one up for me. Human resources, the next one. Performance management report. And that'll be Lynn Bayes again then. Is that happening as far as we know?
I'll need to check on that one, Chair, but I'll get back to you if that's okay.
Lovely, thanks. Supporting a credit union, I'm up to where that is, and is that still happening, Anton?
That's the plan, yes.
Yeah, that's the plan. Good. Financial services, Rydal is financial strategy. That, I take it, still happening?
Yes, definitely.
Council capacity. Head scratching time. I'm not surprised. I've got a lot of scratching of my head over council capacity as to when and how. Do we know what
Again.
the situation is?
Yes, that's still the plan to bring it then.
And what's its likelihood of it coming? Because we're going to end up with no council and a plan if we aren't careful. At the moment, we've got a council and no plan.
I think it's very likely. I think we need to do it by then because some of the funding runs out in October.
Yeah.
So yes.
Even if we do what we did last time and pull out the bits from it that we need, as we've done later in the agenda tonight. Equalities. Louise.
Yes. That will come in September, Chair, yes,
That's now definitely back on, is it? Good.
definitely, yes.
Human resources and organisational development, employment-related policies.
There won't be any policies to come in September, Chair.
So that has come off now.
Yep, for that meeting, yes.
And this is what I'm saying we need to be doing before the next one each time, because when you look at the size of agenda and you're discussing whether or not you should be taking things or can't take things, I'm led to believe from what it says there that we've got it. Now, if we were to flip along into October, I think you'd find the same thing again. Employment-related policies, not October, November, sorry, Emma. Now, is that one happening in November?
We're not quite sure. It depends on how long unison consultation takes, and unfortunately it does take us quite a long time to get policies through within the organisation, so they are generally on there as a standing item, and we take them off if the policies are not ready to come through the committee process.
That's fine if it's 3 months ahead or whatever. But when you get into me looking at what we might have in the, and I shouldn't be doing this here, it should have been at the beginning of this month. We'd have had it on at the beginning of the month and it's off now when we're trying to plan what happens at the next meeting. So somehow that's one of the things we need to have a look at, I would have thought. Housing services, climate change and energy efficiency measures, railway taverns.
Yes, Chair, that will be coming in September.
Yes, I thought it was. And policy and resources, Pickering starter units.
Again, Chair, yes, in September.
H.W. Howard Wallace, yes. Right, lovely. Sorry about that, but I can't do it on the 3rd. I can't do it on the 3rd of July because we've missed it. And it seems best when we've got all the officers here to do them right through. Right, lovely. Thank you for your forbearance with that one. Government consultations. this.
Chairman, sorry, just on the
Yeah.
forward plan, just a few points, if I could.
Yeah, please.
The Railway Tavern, energy efficiency measures. Obviously, we decided to approve funding subject to an environmental climate change impact assessment. Construction has started, workers are on site, and this is not coming to committee till the 23rd of September. I thought I'd raise that again because I don't feel we had a satisfactory answer to the question which came from our group on that one. The other thing I just wanted to raise as well is around delivery of the council plan. I can't see anything on here unless it's the ambiguous one around performance management report Q1. I can't see anything on here about that had been raised previously in the last meeting.
Can we do them one at a time if we can?
Okay.
That one, I agree with you, and I thought the council plan, where it says here the council plan, was the council plan. And so that's, you're underlining what I'm trying to find out, because if the forward plan says means what it says and says what it means, we can both work forward. And I'll go back from that one to the Railway Tavern. I told you exactly what I knew and know at the Railway Tavern. I also said that February this way that the Railway Tavern was all kicked off and started before the council had started to do anything about its climate change policy in relation to building works. And on that basis, we're trying to retrofit in planning terms rather than just, finish it and then retrofit. We're trying to do it as we go along. I told your colleague in your group that I had been promised, and it's still the promise that stands on the table, that climate change carbon calculation will be with us by September, and I have been told nothing any different. If you would like to have a special P&R to do it, with plenty of items to go on there, but I would have thought that it's enough under control without doing that. I can't do anything tonight. We're getting a report in September. I can't do anything between now and then.
No, I completely understand that. It's just we agreed subject to that happening, and it's not happened. Construction work has started on that building. It's your proposal, you put it forward, and it's not happened. There's nothing we can do, maybe, but it hasn't been done. And there was a third thing I was going to mention, but I think it slipped off my mind now. So
Sorry, Kane.
I'll leave it there. One thing I would say is, I think going forward, rather than us going through each item like this, it'd be more sensible if you, Chair, were to have discussions with the senior officers and then you tell us where things are in terms of progress with the forward plan. It doesn't seem a good use of time to do that item by item through all 14 things at the start of the meeting.
I agree totally with you. The only problem that you have with that is not listening. I actually said the solution to this before I started to go through it item by item is that we discuss it, the chair and vice chair discuss it with the officers for the November meeting before the September meeting. We can't, this bit was said twice, go through what is going to happen for the next meeting at the beginning of July. Now, we've missed the beginning of July. So the answer to that question is what I said before you asked the question. Of course it would be better. I've just apologised to the committee for taking up their time in going through it. And then you say, it would be much better if you hadn't. Well, it doesn't work like that.
But surely you had a pre-meeting before P&R happened. At
Yes,
some point
we've
in the
had
very
several.
recent future.
We've had oodles of pre-meetings and oodles of pre-discussions and whatever.
Yeah.
And this thing has not worked. And I'm not laying blame as to why it hasn't worked. I apologise for it not working. I've given you the solution, which turns out to be the same as you're suggesting as a brilliant idea.
Well, I
as to
can't,
what
I
the-
can't
as to
work it
what the
out.
s-
But
Let me finish, I didn't
I'll
interrupt
leave-
you.
No, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there.
I'm not going to leave it there, though. I made a suggestion as to how it could be solved. And then you come up saying, wouldn't it be better if? And the same solution. And I know my ancient memory's not working that well, but I suggest if you listen to the tape, you'll find your solution already said. Right, we will leave it there. You are right. Government consultations. What have we got on that? We have got a side issue, but that's the best place to put it on the agenda, and that is the consultation on the minerals and waste plan. And that affects the whole of Rydale. It isn't a government consultation, but it is a North Yorkshire or North Yorkshire and York and National Parks and everybody under the sun consultation. And we need to put in a response to it. Now, there's several ways we can do this. We can debate it for several hours, which would need a special P&R. We can hand it over the decision-making on it to officers in consultation with the chair. We can leave it to full council, which is risky because it could take several hours, and I don't think that would be fair on the chair of full council to have a several hours plug. It might not, we might all agree with it, but we need to do that. Anybody any thoughts as to how they would like to proceed on it? Paul?
Would it be sensible, Chair, for people who had to have concerns to let the officers and yourself know, and then for you to report back on anything that might be in the least bit contentious, which they might not wish to take forward?
I think that's the sort of consultation I would do automatically anyway. That's, you know, this is what people have said, this is what we've got here as collections. I'm not happy with that one. What are your thoughts? And keep bouncing it. I'm quite happy with that approach if we do it that way. But it is major for the people of Rydale whether we have fracking along the A170, because you can't do it in the national park, because the government wanted it to be done in the desolate northeast, but not in national parks. So that, by definition, would have you having fracking all the way along the road from Pickering to Thirsk, possibly beyond Pickering, Thornley Dale to Thirsk, whatever, drilling into the national park. Now, if that were to happen, that would be a massive impact on Rydale. I don't know. Rydale Council didn't oppose that last time, but we might want it to. I can give you Gary's phrase, and I hope I'm not misquoting Gary. Is Gary here?
No, he's not, Chair.
No, right. Because it was put forward at the hearing that the inspector's hearing that we didn't have, that you had a big boundary, you know, 3.5 kilometres round the park, so that it wasn't in a line all as close to the park boundary as you could get. And the District Council is not aware of the evidence that has supported the proposed 3.5 kilometre buffer zone round the national park. So it's moved even since the last time Rydale put in its consultation.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're preempting some of the discussion, because I know that a lot of people, well, we both know that there are a lot of people looking at this, and perhaps we should wait for their comments before we actually go into anything in any depth. I wouldn't like to be in a position where we discuss something and then it's preempted we could end up by embarrassing some people who've got some perfectly good points who are going in the same direction as us.
And I don't think it worked like last time. I've just seen you out of my eye corner, Keane. It was people on the same side had differing views, and there was a whole mishmash of views, and that view of Rydale Council is the opposite probably of yours, mine and Di's, but wasn't the opposite at that time because that policy wasn't on the table in the Minerals and Waste Plan. Keane.
Thanks, Chairman. It was just to ask, Roy, obviously you're looking for us to come to an approach of how we're going to deal with the consultation. We don't know, I don't know, because I've just found out about it, who's consulting us, what they're consulting us on, when the deadline is. I don't know if we can even decide how to approach the consultation, because is it for us to do that at this meeting? We can reply to consultations, but when we have done that in the past, there've been an agenda item with background information, with an officer response, etc., for us to look at, and we haven't got any of that. So, do you know when the deadline is? Do you know what they're asking us about?
The deadline is, as far as I can read from this, but it's, this is, may I have a mistake or I might be reading it wrongly. Yes, I think it's the 21st of July, so it's only just arrived with us, to the 15th of September. I do know that as soon as it arrived here on the 20-something of July, that Gary asked for this to North Yorkshire to give us an extension so that we went extension of a fortnight, 10 days or whatever, so that it could be done as a report, so that it could be done as everything you're saying at the September meeting of P&R. And if that could have happened, and in fact almost if that happens, I was saying tonight, if we get an extension, can we have that overriding whatever we decide? Because the chair of here and the head of planning discussing it and are agreeing the council's position isn't a fraction as good as the committee looking at it and deciding what the committee wants. So on that basis, I think that would be the safety net for all of us. If the county will give us an extension, then that's what we'll have and that's what we would go for. But if they don't, how are we going to cope with it? Thoughts? Which do you like the feel of? Di?
I suggest that if we can't get an extension, then we have to ask members of not just this committee, but of the whole of council, because other people will have views on this as well, to feed those in to you as chair and the officers that will be working on our response, and formulate it that way, because the timing is so tight. I mean, in an ideal world, I think it's a very significant issue for Rydale, and so we should, you know, have done something like a member workshop to really discuss it. But I don't think we have the time for that. So the most sensible approach to me would be to do it that way, that people can feed their comments in.
Anybody else? Can you have a go at wording something out of this then, Simon? The committee's approach is firstly and ideally that the North Yorkshire gives us an extension, and that it... Sorry, Joy.
Hey, can I just ask, is this a North Yorkshire-wide thing, or just for the vast Rydale's views on
No, they're asking Rydale, Selby, whatever.
Do most councils not really meet in August? Why have they done this on the 21st of July
I couldn't possibly...
yeah.
I couldn't possibly...
Are they not wanting anybody to
No.
respond so they can just...
No.
Right, okay, I just think it's...
Yes,
really
it may be, but that's
silly.
not going to get us very far by... but if it was November and dark and I was carrying a brick, I might throw it. That's the first choice, to have the extension. The second choice is that we have a consultation, we have a special P&R in early September to consider it. I'm going to ask you to vote on 2 and 3 because that sounds like me making a decision. Special P&R, end of August, beginning of September, or we do it in a consultation with the chair of P&R and the head of planning in consultation with all members. Now, I might need some help in fielding that lot because I can imagine people will not send me 3 lines as a proposal. And there is no way I have got the time, and probably the officers haven't got the time, to go through the lot. It's got to be, we oppose this because 3 or 4 lines. We are in favour of this because whatever the consultation has got in it. Because if it's not simplified down like that, we're just going to end up bogged down with it and not get anywhere. So the choices are a committee in early September, or a consultation through the chair now. And I don't know, Philip, if you've any idea as to which would be the least workload for the officers.
I think on that which officers will work with whichever member preference is, in all honesty.
Yeah, and our preference would be probably to go down the route which was least work for you, so have another go.
I think in all honesty, to minimise officer work, we'll have something through yourself, Chair, rather than calling an additional meeting. Probably the officer preference, but we will...
Okay, I just thought we needed that fact on the table. It may or may not balance the whole lot. So we need to vote between... Paul?
Do we actually need to make a decision between one or the other? Well, can we not leave it for you and the officers to look at whatever consultation comes back to you, and then if you feel that an emergency meeting is necessary, we call an emergency meeting. If on the other hand the comments are sort of fairly understandable and fairly agreeable, and there's no real controversy, then perhaps there would be no need for another meeting.
I know I forgot my paperwork this evening, but my memory must be completely failing. We have had battles in this, and I don't mean discussions, we have had battles in this council chamber that have gone on for hours at an end as to what one group of people think is totally reasonable and the opposing group of people think is totally unreasonable. So, nice of you to sort of hang the noose up for me, Paul, like that, but I do not intend to decide between whichever side this lines up on. We have to decide in principle. But nice of you to offer. So, can I see a show of hands for those in favour of holding a committee meeting in... I'm just looking at the date that will click it. It needs to be early September.
Can I just say, Chairman, Councillor Andrews is not on this committee, and he's the only person, and obviously he's subbing for somebody, so he has the right to vote, but he's the only person voting for saying we should have another meeting, and everyone else who's on the committee as permanent members doesn't want a meeting.
I think it would be fair to say, Councillor Duncan, that I had noted that. And I think as you're highlighting it, those who hadn't noted it before have definitely noted it now. And no, that's not an invite to anybody else to say the same thing again in case somebody's missed it. So, and those in favour of doing it as a consultation through the officers and the chair to consult with all members of council, right through and beyond if necessary. Well, I think that's fairly clear. Can you get that down into a...
Is that if they don't do an extension?
That's if they don't do an extension. If we get an extension, then it will come to the September meeting that's on the forward plan that might still look something like the forward plan on the 23rd of September. So we need an extension for a fortnight, don't we? Have you got some words of wisdom, Simon?
Got some suggested wording, Chair. Policy and Resources Committee's preferred approach is for North Yorkshire County Council to grant an extension to the consultation on the Joint Waste and Minerals Plan. If this is not forthcoming, all members of Council be asked to send comments to the Head of Planning to agree a response in consultation with the Chair of P&R.
Right. I'll propose that. Di seconding. You're not quick enough, Steve. Right, those in favour? Good. Sorry about that. And once again, I agree with you totally, Keane, but it landed on us. And we have another one here that I'm going to ask when it landed. Public sector exit payment consultation. Do we know when that consultation started? Emma?
I believe it was earlier on this week. That's certainly when I was notified about it through an LGA email.
So, thanks. So they're doing a consultation from the 20-something of July through till the 13th of August. Now, I don't know what they're on, but I'd like to be on some of the same stuff. Seems quite good if you can do things at that speed. Have we any more knowledge on it, Emma, at all?
I don't have a huge amount of knowledge in terms of some of the guidance and cover letter that I've looked at that's been downloaded. It looks as if they are targeting certain people for the consultations, such as the LGA. So there's a list of organisations that they are specifically targeting for information.
In 3 weeks. Well, I hope they find lots of people sitting there at their desks at the end of July for the first fortnight of August. And I hope they are in as civil servants when they get the response back in the middle of August so they can deal with it promptly. Right, where did this come from, Emma?
I noticed it from a local government association bulletin that came through, but it's an MHCLG consultation.
It's two things I want to be possible, and I'm like giving you jobs to do, but would it be possible to check with North Yorkshire to see if they've been consulted and asked about it and given any timescale? And where do you think a letter complaining bitterly should be coming from?
Okay, no worries. I'll take that on.
And the second part, does a letter come from whom on what? I'm not going to sign any letters yet till I know what's happening and what it's about. But I'm disgusted at it if it's accurate. Right, well, we've got till the 13th of August. The next thing is, are we going to do anything about it or not? Basically, and we've got a case in here, we had a case in this council. Sorry.
Councillor Clark, can
Yeah.
I just ask, am I the only one here that is totally confused that I'm being asked to comment and discuss on items that I have absolutely nothing in front of me on, no paperwork, nothing? And I mean, I've been to many P&R meetings since I joined the council, and I've never ever seen anything like this. So it's very difficult to actually know what on earth you're talking about, because I haven't got it in writing.
Yeah,
And I think it's unfair, and I think these items should have either been emailed to us if we were supposed to have an opinion on it, or it should go to the next P&R meeting when we've had this chance to research it. I think this is extremely unfair and confusing.
This email was sent to me this morning, and it tells me no more and no less.
I appreciate that, Councillor Clark.
Hang on. You can come back in a minute. Let me have a response to it. I am thoroughly disgusted, probably more so than you are, because I'm sitting here trying to chair it and looking as though I am. But if this has come in and central government gives us a fortnight to do it, and there's nothing there. Those are email addresses. Email addresses. Point. So even if we did get it, you can't do a report on it, you can't find out about it, etc. Now, I've got a choice. I either leave it as it was when these consultations weren't brought to us, or trying to drag them out.
I'm still completely lost as what we're trying to achieve here this evening. I think this is why we have officers. These emails come in from central government or whatever, and they respond to them. They don't always come like this to P&R, and we're expected to know anything about it. And I think it's wrong. And to say you're disgusted, I hope you're not saying you're disgusted with the officers. I hope you're saying that it's
disgusted with anybody.
You use the word disgusted. That this is
disgusted. Sorry, I thought you said disgust. No, I am disgusted. But I am disgusted that this has turned up at this point with a fortnight, and you heard Emma say, as far as she knows, it's only just arrived in the last few days, with a fortnight's consultation. That's what I'm disgusted at, and I still am.
But surely, if that's arrived on your desk, or sorry, the officer's desk, the officers could contact you. You could then decide whether this needs to be consulted on by the rest of, within a 24-hour period. You could read an email, reply to an email, and then the officers could then send something to us. But I think this is why we have officers.
That takes us to tomorrow morning.
But this is why we have officers. We have talented staff that can deal with this.
Right. So what are you suggesting that they
I'm suggesting that we stick with the agenda, and that the emails that come in like this are dealt with in a proper manner and not by a last-minute job at a P&R meeting. This is ludicrous.
I agree, it's ludicrous. But
Then stop doing it and let's stick with the agenda.
Hang on. The government is consulting on whether we pay somebody £200,000 to leave this council as a number. They put a limit on it before of 90,000, and we quickly paid off somebody at 130 odd. Now, that to me is important. Whether this covers that or is that, I have no idea, because it has arrived, and you said turn it round within 24 hours. I've only had it for
I'm saying it's not right
9.
and proper that we're expected to discuss this
I'm
this
not asking
evening,
you to discuss
or
it.
to decide whether there should be more consultation or what the response to this is. This
I-
is why we have officers.
So you're suggesting that we don't tell the officers anything on a 3-week consultation?
I'm suggesting that if the officers need something, then they could come to you for an
Which
answer.
they have done. Which they have done.
But I don't understand what you want us to achieve here tonight with this.
Well, I don't know whether people are annoyed, surprised, shocked, happy, contented with a 3-week consultation from central government. And that's what I'm asking. I don't mind. If you're happy with it or don't want it brought here, that's fine. I'm saying that's something that I think we ought to be concerned about, but mainly concerned about the fact that we have got 3 weeks to consult on something we don't even know what it is yet. Steve?
I think she'll get banged back and said this is highly inappropriate. We have no time to discuss it. We need more time, and we're absolutely disgusted with what you've sent us.
Yeah, that would
And that would
that's
be it.
close to my opinion.
That'd be it.
Yeah, we can't respond to it. We don't know what it is or any detail to it. Di?
Could I just suggest to move things on that perhaps we actually ask the officer to see if they can find some more information on this consultation, because I have to agree with Councillor Docker. I don't know what we're anything about it. I don't think any of us do, and you've already said, Chair, you don't either. So if we could have some more information on the consultation by email, that would be helpful, and then perhaps we're in a better position to actually respond to it. I mean, I don't see how we can form another committee meeting to discuss every single consultation that comes out. So, again, it may be one that needs to be agreed, a response needs to be agreed in collaboration with yourself as chair. Because we can't have another meeting for every single consultation that the government issues. I completely agree, the timescale is ridiculous. But, and we could respond to them to say, you need to extend that timescale. But I think we just all need to know a little bit more about it before we can make any sort of informed discussion, really.
I think we need to know a lot more about it. We can't respond to it as it is, but equally, the comment was made about officers. If officers hadn't brought it to us for tonight, they're not doing what we've asked them to do. They brought it to us. They've even brought the county waste consultations to us, which I think is absolutely spot on. But if they bring us things, then we have to decide what we're doing with it. Okay.
Could I just, I think it's incredibly frustrating and painful for everybody, yourself included, Chairman. Obviously, you put this on here probably with, in good faith, that we'd then be able to bring consultations forward as a standing item. It's obviously causing a bit of confusion for everybody. Can I just make a suggestion, if you're happy with this, that we in effect make a blanket delegation to the relevant service head in consultation with the Chair of Policy and Resources Committee to respond to any relevant government consultations. Then it's over to you. If you think that can slot into the P&R agenda, I should consult members on this, I want to send an email out asking for views at short notice to see what people think, is it controversial or not, then we're clear for the future. Anything that comes up, we'd like you to tell us about them as and when they arise as best as you can. We'd like you to send us a copy of the consultation response that goes in, but it's over to the relevant service head, the professional officer, in consultation with you as the political lead of the council, for you then to make decisions from there. It's putting trust and faith into you, but I think that is really the only way forward. So I'd like to propose that, and hopefully I've got a seconder.
Hang on just a minute. What's the wording of what you're proposing?
I'm happy to say it again, Simon. You can make a note. I haven't obviously got it written down, but Policy and Resources delegates authority to the relevant service lead in consultation with the Chairman of Policy and Resources Committee to respond to government consultations.
Janet?
Is that to respond without any of us adding to any of this consultation? Should we be having an email response from other members, or
It's over to the chair of P&R and the officer to consult with whoever, hopefully as widely as possible, potentially take it to committee, potentially take it to a working party, what have you. But if needed, at a bare minimum, there has to be consultation by the officer in consultation with the chairman, at a bare minimum, and at least then there's some democratic input.
Paul?
Yes, Chair. I think the democratic input is the most important aspect. And rather than just leave the motion as Councillor Duncan had suggested, perhaps it could be a little phrase could be added on, subject to the chair having authority to refer to members if he considers appropriate. And I'm sorry if that would sort of put your head in a noose, John, but I think it's probably a good way forward.
I'm happy to amend my proposal to be after the widest possible consultation with members.
Can I make a modest suggestion to this? That what Councillor Duncan has proposed is exactly what I've done tonight. We got 3 days ago a consultation from North Yorkshire. I could have not brought it here. It isn't a government consultation. I thought you ought to all have an opinion and a view as to how it was handled, rather than just call a special PR now at some point and say, tough, that's what we're doing. The second one, these wonderful long timescales you've all got. Consult with officers and get officers. This arrived this morning. So I could have swept it under the carpet, but by the time we'd look back under the carpet in a fortnight, the consultation is over. So, hang on a second. If we are going to go down the route you are suggesting, which is the route you've done for the last 2 years, that's fine. If we're going to go down the route that I'm proposing, that we have more discussion at committee and things are brought to committee, and the committee says, what a stupid idea, Councillor Clark, and it gets beaten and driven out and things, that's fine. But I'm not sitting here dictating which ones I think should be watched as far as possible. As far as possible, I will bring things to committee so that I will make suggestions when they get here. And if committee wants to do something, that's fine. If committee says, no, John, there you are, get on with it, that's fine. But the decision making is yours, not mine. It's not a dictatorship.
I'm sorry, Councillor Clark, I'm still stand by the point that it is unfair to ask anybody to sit here and have an opinion on anything they haven't got in writing. So whether you've had an email or not that you want a decision on, we should have it in front of us or have had an email that we can access so we can read it prior to the meeting. Turning up as chair of the meeting with a pile of emails and asking us to make opinions, make decisions on, I'm sorry, is unfair and I think unprofessional.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes. And several things if you listen to the tape. Public sector exit payment consultation. Following the publication by Her Majesty's Treasury of guidance for central government departments in respect of special severance payments on the 28th of May, MHCLG have today, undated,
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. Can I just check whether you are wanting the stream to be live or not at this
No,
point?
I can leave the stream on if you want.
Thank you.
I've today issued a consultation which runs until the 13th of August on guidance to cover similar payments in local authorities. Copies of the guidance and cover letter can be downloaded in PDF format from the Local Government Pension Scheme LGPS Advisory Board website. Right, I have none of that. Kind regards, Emma. And the rest of it is email addresses, etc. And can you please respond? Many thanks, Harry. Now, all I've done is bring it to you, tell you this is flying about. It's flying about as from this morning. And to assume that Emma and myself and anybody else is sitting around waiting for one of these to come in is not acceptable. Equally, I don't know whether it's minor or major. All I know is when the last time the government tried to put in a cap of 90,000, we paid somebody in a great rush 132,000 to get it through before the cap fell. Now, I want to continue to consult with people on that basis. If you have learnt anything from that more than I've said, that's fine. I can't help it. Right. Can we go back into the meeting as such, because you've got that? Claire? Fine. Good. Right. Is anybody wishing to speak for... you've spoken for, Keane, haven't you? Anybody wishing to speak against the motion?
Mr. Chairman, are we talking about the motion, or are we talking about the motion with the additional part about...
Well, can we hear the whole lot as it stands? I'll read out the motion and then the amendment to cover Di's point, which is absolutely right.
The original motion was Policy and Resources Committee delegates authority to the relevant service lead in consultation with the chair of P&R to respond to government consultations. And then the additional wording added was after the widest possible consultation with members.
And the amendment? That's it as amended.
I've accepted that to amendment
right, okay,
without...
that'll do me. Yeah, that'll do. Right, I wish to speak against that. If I understand that correctly, it is saying that the officers will decide on government consultations on what happens to them. That's fine if you're not going to, if we're not running the council. Because if they come to me to consult on this, I shall say, no comment. Get on with it. Because P&R has decided it doesn't want to be involved. Now, that one's very near to that one happening. But what happens if and we've had consultations on local plans, minerals and waste plans and things that have arrived incredibly late in the past, and we don't know about it. That would cause more irritation from members, saying, well, why is it being done this late? And I'm looking at the person who's usually screaming that. Why is it being done this late? Why hasn't it been done earlier? And I've asked officers to bring it to us earlier, which they have done brilliantly. You know, bringing this up today, Emma, thank you very much. And, you know, if you said, oh, no, I didn't receive it till Thursday, that would have been nigh on excusable if it hadn't come to tonight's meeting. Because I'm the one with the grief here. But it's so much easier to say, oh, it's too late for tonight's meeting, I'm not taking it to them. The North Yorkshire consultation, we've sorted out, I thought, amicably. So, my view is, if you want somebody to chair this committee and work with the committee, rather than decide for the committee, then that's the difference with what we've got. I'm not here to decide for the committee. I'm here to decide with the committee and work out and try and deliver the committee's decisions.
Do I infer from that speech that
No,
we're
that was a
listening?
seconding. That was an opposition.
That was an abdication of responsibility by the chair of P&R?
Do I infer from
No,
that?
do I?
No. I heard what you said. Do I infer from that that you're suggesting I'm abdicating responsibility? Yeah. Oh, right. On what basis?
On the basis that you seem very unwilling to take any responsibility without referring it to a whole committee of people, which is not always a practical step to take in this time scale that you are talking about. And we've spent so much time talking about it, it's a complete waste of breath.
So you don't want to be consulted with in future, that's fine. Janet.
I'm sorry, but I can't agree with that. I want to be consulted. Excuse me, Councillor Graham. Thank you. I would like to be consulted about things. I don't want things to be decided in this council or in this committee without me knowing about it. I would like to know about what's going on. I don't want to be left in the dark. I don't want things happening here, there and somewhere else without me being consulted. At least then I have a chance to say yes or no, or I don't mind. I would like to be consulted. Thank you.
Di, you've always spoken for once. I'll come back to you after Di.
Yeah, I mean, I'm maybe misunderstanding this, but I thought that the second part of the proposal that Councillor Andrews made referred to consulting with people as widely as possible. So I don't understand where the argument is coming from, that the proposal isn't to consult people. I think, you know, when there's a long time scale, then items can come to this committee, but when it's a very short time scale and no members know exactly really what the consultation is about, and there isn't time to find out very quickly what the consultation is about, then this will be helpful in order to be able to respond to as many of these as we possibly can. But to say it's not consulting other members, I think it is, because the opportunity is there to consult with people. It might not be in a committee, it might need to be by email, but it is still a consultation with other members, John. So I don't think it's stopping us saying our piece.
I've got that, Di, but what do I do with that one today? I could have not told you about it. That's fine. What do I do with the North Yorkshire one? Both of them have come in at 0 timescales. Paul?
Chair, in answer to Mrs Graham's point, your responsibility is to make sure that this committee is consulted and that you do, and that the wishes of this committee are implemented. Your responsibility is not to make decisions for yourself, except in very exceptional circumstances when there is absolutely nothing else that you can do.
Thank you, Paul. And I have said in this council, I broke a decision of full council. And that was over car parking charges. Because we would have gone, I can't remember which way round it was, we'd have gone from charging to not charging, or not charging to charging, and back again to the other way round in a week. And I said, no, I will not put my name to that piece of stupidity. But this motion is saying, as I understand it, the officers will decide, and then there'll be consultation with me. And my consultation on that one would be, committee members don't want to know, forget it. Because the ones that have got time to come here, I wouldn't dream of not bringing them here. And there's some that are simple and they can come with an officer's report and. But when you get things like those two, and we talked the first one out, and it took us ages on the national park, not the national park, the minerals and waste plan, it was doable. But this motion is saying, you decide, John, on no evidence, because we don't want to decide on no evidence. And somebody tell me what it is.
That's not what it's saying at all.
No, it isn't. That's not what it's saying. Keane is saying consultation with members. Sure, that's what he's saying.
But this is consultation with members. What better consultation can you do than this?
Could you not, when you receive an email like that first thing in the morning, at least forward it to us immediately and
I
say,
could.
do you wish to consult on
If
this?
I had the ability to do that, I would willingly do that.
Well, with the greatest respect, shouldn't we have a chair of P&R who can
I'm
send
sure
us an
we should.
email?
I'm sure we should, but you haven't.
So we're supposed to rely on the post, or we're supposed to
No.
be in this situation because the
No,
chair of
this is far
P&R
quicker than the
can't use an
post.
email.
So I've read it out to you. What would you have done with it?
I would have emailed everybody with it
Yeah,
and
but
said,
then when
what's
you've
your
got it,
opinion?
what would you have recommended with it?
I'd leave it to the officers who know what they're doing.
We have,
I have
we
picked you
have
up,
a
Steve. I have.
we have a discussion on particular items. We're now talking about how in future we should discuss items of this kind. Is that just asking the officers? I mean, is it appropriate to do that without putting it as a request on the agenda?
Through you, Chair, there's an item on government consultations on the agenda, and we're talking about government consultations, so it is an item of business which we've given notice of.
Councillor Andrews has been trying to speak for a while.
Yes,
Joy,
and Councillor Arnold, I think. Oh, you haven't, Paul? No.
Councillor Joy Andrews.
Joy Andrews. Too many Andrewses.
Yeah. If you've brought this to the meeting this evening at short notice, are you looking for us to give you an answer to how to deal with this, or have you got something in mind on how to deal with?
I think it was Steve Arnold that gave me, saying we ought to be writing them and finding out more about it, and saying in disgust, how on earth can we do this in a fortnight? And it's.
But I think the what Councillor Duncan and the amendment that was put on it is the only way that this can be dealt with, surely, other than a snotty letter as well. But otherwise,
I accept that. I accept that completely.
I thought you were saying you were
But
going to
no,
speak against
it's
it.
It's been said that officers do them, and then they're brought to committee if the officers want to.
Yeah, that was the one we voted on before. But this one is saying that things that come in this
No, it's an amendment. The two together, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm just a little confused in that if you're speaking against this and you don't want this to happen on this one, what other way have we got to deal with it?
We can leave it down Councillor Duncan's approach, which he decides. Which is what he said. It's lacking leadership and whatever else other nice Councillor Duncan's comments were. And I'm saying I'd rather bring things here, and this is one of them, that really hasn't got a home to go to at all. It's probably best dropped in the bin until it costs us 50,000. But if it's going to come here, I can't see a better way of doing it than having consultations brought here. Now, if the committee says, we don't want to look at that, go away, Chair, and you decide, which is what you've done on the other one, that's fine.
I just see that if this has come last minute and it's got to be done in a fortnight's time and we're not going to call another meeting and it needs responding to, something like that would be better coming from whoever deals
Agreed,
with an
gentlemen.
officer within consultation with you.
Agreed.
And the email.
Yes.
But that's what.
Agreed totally. No, the motion says they should all go down that route. It was my hearing. Try again, Simon.
Wording is Policy and Resources Committee delegate authority to the relevant service lead in consultation with the Chair of Policy and Resources to respond to government consultations after the widest possible consultation with members.
That's government consultations, full stop. And I'm saying no, government consultation. we're unlucky that we've got one here that's a North Yorkshire consultation and one here that's a joke. But government consultation should come to this committee, in my view. If not, we can take it off the agenda and leave it. And we can carry on not knowing.
Can I put an amendment in then to say that government consultations that end before the next P&R meeting come to, don't come, that is done that way? Or is that you're not wanting?
Chairman, can I just say, this was I was generally trying to help you out here, and this is the last time I'm ever going to do it because it's quite frankly ridiculous.
If that's the case, good, because your helpfulness is not.
This was allowing the greatest flexibility to everybody for the benefit of everybody, and the concept of the words widest possible consultation include, where possible, if there is a P&R coming, stick it on the P&R agenda. If there's a working party that might be relevant, stick it to the working party. If you have to put an email around everybody, stick an email around everybody. I am the only person on this committee and on this council who's done the role that you're doing now. And I understand that things come in that you don't expect at short notice that you have to try and deal with in some way. And you are the point of contact, whether you like it or not, with the officers, because you are the sort of lead councillor, politician, whatever you want to call it, from us. And we have to put some degree of faith in you to be able to engage with our officers and provide some direction about how things are dealt with. If that email had come to you, not this morning, but tomorrow morning, what would then have happened? Because you couldn't have brought it here, because there was no upcoming committee. You could have called a special P&R, impractical, costly, inconvenient to everybody. This is allowing, whatever the circumstance, at the bare minimum, there has to be consultation with you. And you will be able to say, that needs to go to committee. Take it to committee, we've got a meeting coming up, it should go there. If that's not possible for practical reasons, you say, I'm going to send an email's got to go to every councillor for views to be taken on. It's very, very simple, and it does effectively what we need it to do, because this is unsustainable. I think it was a good will what you tried to do with putting the government consultations on here, but then to have them pop in like this, it just doesn't work. So I think this is the best way forward. I get your point around that's one of them is a local consultation effect by the county. We may well I'd be happy to accept it that it's just consultations in general, but it's then over to you to make a judgment as to what to do, because it's the only practical way forward. And if you're saying it's an acceptable way of dealing with the minerals and waste, an acceptable way of dealing with that one, to delegate to the officer in consultation with you, then why would it be an issue for that to happen going forward? It would resolve this situation that we've now got before us. I would like to move to the vote, because I think there is general sort of consensus amongst everybody, apart from yourself, Chairman, on this one. And I think it's the right way forward. Councillor Andrews took on board what he said. Councillor Keel as well seems to be voicing support. It seems to be a practical way forward. I don't accept Joy's amendment just simply because I think it's already covered in there. And I would like to go to the vote on this, because I think we've discussed it for far too long.
Your choice. Were you wanting to speak, Jenny?
Please. I'm sorry to say this, but I don't think we were consulted on an awful lot of things for about a year and a half in this council. Now, I would like to at least be consulted. I am on this committee. I have a right to be consulted. We all have a right to be consulted. Things shouldn't get passed through council or passed through here or passed through there without us being consulted. By email, fair enough. You can send me an email. I look at emails every day. I don't mind not having another committee meeting. But I really think that we ought to be asked. We ought to be asked whether we have an opinion on this, or whether we want to have an opinion, whether we want to say anything about things. We ought to be asked.
Can I have a right of reply, please, Mr. Chairman? Because I think that does refer to me, which is, this states very clearly the widest possible consultation with members. Could be council, could be committee, could be a working party, could be an email. It states the widest possible consultation. That's clear. Councillor Frank has stated that for a year and a half, things happened that members weren't consulted on. I would like a list of what those items were, the dates that they were decided, who was and wasn't consulted, and unless you can provide that, I would ask her respectfully to withdraw that statement that members were not consulted. She stated something that I can't get my head around, seems a bit of a paradox, that things were passed through council without consultation. How can something be passed through council without consultation? It's gone through council. She may well not have liked the decisions that council has taken, as sometimes Councillor Clark doesn't like those decisions either, but they are the decisions of the democratically elected council that made decisions on the basis of the information before them. So unless I can get a list of things that were decided without consultation, then I would ask respectfully again for Councillor Frank to withdraw what I believe to be an unfair accusation directed at me, who was leader of the council at the time, and I take responsibility for everything this council did during that year and a half.
I'm sorry to prolong this, but I'm going to come back to it. Keane, I don't think you yet understand the difference between consultation and decision making. All of the LGR stuff, we were probably closer than you think we were, but it wasn't debated and voted on in council. And I'm saying to P&R tonight, we can do it on the words of Mike Potter, the cosy fireside chat basis consultation. But that is not...
Point of order, Mr Chairman. It was proposed and seconded that we'd move to the vote. I believe under the terms of committee procedure that we then have to move to a vote on whether we go to the vote. That was proposed and seconded that we move to the vote.
Councillor Duncan, you said you were trying to be helpful, and it's not very obvious. I think if you haven't got from what I've said so far, then you probably never will.
Mr Chairman, can I propose after this we have a 5-minute adjournment with the live stream off, please?
No, I'm quite happy, whatever.
Councillor Clark, or Chair of PNR, this is an absolute embarrassment. If there are members of the public watching this committee, I am embarrassed and ashamed to be a part of this committee. Well, it is. It's an embarrassment, and it's a waste of everybody's time, officers, members of the public,
I agree.
members.
I agree.
How is a simple agenda item taking nearly an hour and a half to discuss? It's the same every time we meet, and it's pathetic. I'm losing the will to live. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry about the last part, and I'm quite happy for that to be on the live stream. Because as far as I'm concerned, we had two items here that would have taken at most half an hour, and if you were lucky, quarter of an hour, and it's been hijacked. Right, can we go to the vote, please? Well, he just asked us to go to the vote, so we'll go into it. Yeah? Those in favour? Those against? That is clearly lost.
Sorry, Chair, that was 6 votes for and 4 against.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. I was thinking of where we're going next. I apologise. Item 8, recommendation from the Grants Working Party, page 13. Steve?
I just want to propose that the minutes of the Community Grants Party Working Party are accepted. I hope I've got a second there.
And I wish to move an amendment because I think it includes, there's a comment in here at the top of page 14 that the revision is rejected as the correct process has not been followed. A separate application should be made for the additional funds. Now, I think we can accept the recommendation of that, but except for that bit, because if they haven't delivered what they were given the grant for, and I'm not mentioning any names so we don't have to go off into exempt, if they were given the grant to do something and they haven't done it, then the money by the rules of the Grants Committee should come back to the council.
It's quite complicated.
I realise that, and I'm trying to tread round it.
Because they had... I turned it off, sorry. They had some money, which they spent half of, and they wanted to spend the other half, but we rejected it because they'd been given the equipment they required by North Yorkshire County Council. So they didn't need to spend that money on that other £500. So we rejected that because they wanted that money, but they weren't going to spend it on what they asked for.
Yep.
So it was rejected for them to put another application for that £500 to spend it on what they're going to ask us for. So it's got to come back to the committee because...
And I'm saying that that amendment would mean they pay the £500 back. Hang on, they pay the £500 back because they shouldn't have £500 for spending on something that they didn't have and weren't going to do, and then they apply.
They did spend it on appropriate equipment. And I can't tell you what it was now because I can't remember, but I can look it up.
Just ask Chair, if we are going to discuss this in detail, we might want to move into exempt session.
Trying to avoid it, but I don't think I'm going to succeed. So let's move into exempt.
Could I just speak on whether we move into exempt, please?
Yeah, please.
Just very briefly to say that this was decided by Councillor Andrews, Councillor Arnold, Councillor Dockra, Councillor Keel. I think quite a good cross-representative sample of this council in terms of political persuasion. And they have gone through all of this information, they've discussed it at length in an exempt session, and they came to whatever, I don't know, I wasn't there, but for whatever reason they came to that recommendation. Now I have trust and faith in those 4 individuals, which I think is a representative group of people on this council, to have come to that decision. And to save us all time, I don't think we should revisit the ins and outs of that by moving into exempt and talking about it. So I think we just accept these recommendations, not move into exempt, and actually put faith in the decision that's been taken by the working party, which we asked them to do. Whatever reasons they came to, I believe it must have been for good reasons, and that will save us a lot of time. I don't support moving into exempt.
I wish to move it into exempt on the basis that we're going to be discussing a clearly defined organisation and personal individuals, and therefore it should be discussed in exempt, not in public. Have I got a seconder? Thank you, Paul. Right, those in favour of exempt? Those against? I'm keeping quiet at this point.
It's 5 votes for and 5 votes against, Chair.
In which case we'll move into exempt.
Could you confirm when the live stream has stopped, please?
we're live again. So following that discussion, can I move that the recommendation of the Grants Working Party be approved? Have I got a seconder? I don't know who's second. Claire.
Chair, sorry, Chair. I think it was moved and seconded prior to going into exempt by Councillor Arnold and Councillor Dockwra.
Even better, even better. In which case, can we vote on it? Those in favour? That's wonderful. Move on. Flood management, page 17. Now, there's a recommendation here to P&R, and I tried to ring Becky this morning and got nowhere, that the implementation of SUDS as a compulsory measure rather than as an advice be considered as part of the ongoing review of the local plan. Now, I don't think we've got much to do with that other than refer it to the local plan working group. There is another one buried in it in relation to the pit report and Yorkshire Water and other water companies being made statutory. Now, where do we go with that, Di? Or do we just leave both of those until the flood has worked further at it?
Yes, I think certainly the recommendation about SUDS, I think, does need to go straight to the local plan working party. I think the other one we need to talk more about at the flooding working party before we make a recommendation to the committee. But I would like to sort of recommend the rest of the minutes to the committee as an excellent start for the new working party.
And all we can do, I believe, is note them. Is that correct, Sam? Because we can't approve them. We weren't there, even if many of us were there. Fine. Livestock Working Party, page 21. I don't think there is a distinct recommendation from us here that isn't picked up later in the agenda for tonight, because we need a project officer for that job, but it appears in the capacity work later on. So, as the chair of that, and I think I can sum it up in 2 sentences, we looked at getting a basic livestock market underway. Not officers, not abattoirs, not anything else, but get it basically on the stock so that over time future people can develop at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on this one, which was, you mentioned there that there's nothing in the minutes which isn't picked up later in the agenda. I assume you're talking about the proposal for extra capacity, the officer that's been proposed. Yes. Can I just check, what was that actually discussed as part of the Livestock Market Working Party when it met?
Yes, it was. It was discussed by the Livestock Working Party. It was proposed that we asked, and I'm keeping my eye on Philip here to see if he ever shakes his head, it was suggested that it would need to go to P&R, and if you recall, on 2 previous occasions, we have not been able to progress the livestock market because of lack of capacity. So it's not something that came to a surprise to the working party, or shouldn't come to a surprise to the committee tonight. And if we're going to do, when we're doing it, we will need resources.
So I just heard obviously, Councillor Clark, you said yes, as Councillor Docker said no in my other ear. So was it actually discussed about this officer at the working party, or was it not discussed? Because obviously it's on the agenda. It isn't a recommendation from the working party, it's a separate item. I just was wondering if it was discussed with the working party, the implications of drawing up a project plan in terms of resource and specifically an extra officer.
Sorry, I don't recall at that meeting as saying that we would need an extra officer. That wasn't discussed. What we said was there were two things moving forward that we needed to do before we went anywhere with the livestock market. One was to establish whether actually the land was still available, and that was there, and what the other terms were. We were a long way from appointing a member of staff to start dealing with the Steve, you back in the room. Help me out here. With regard to employing a member of staff, we didn't discuss employing a full-time member of staff at the working party, did we? No. We did. We said there were two things that were needed to be established before we went anywhere. And we haven't got answers to those because we haven't had the next meeting.
Have the members of the Livestock Working Party had a briefing note?
Is that the email you sent us?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I've had that.
That implies you've had it. Claire?
Sorry, no, I don't recall.
Didn't post it to you? It's been sent by email.
So just going back to my question, Chairman, was the issue of a livestock market
I'm
officer
working my way to get
discussed
you. I'm working
at
my
the
way
working
to
party?
get a thorough answer to
Well,
that.
there's three people there. Two are saying no, one is saying yes.
Yes, and I'm now.
Sorry, yes, I have got it and I have read it. Sorry.
Right. Okay, no problem. Philip, can you help us here?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll try, Chair. I do not recall the request for an additional officer being explicitly talked about in the meeting. I think we broadly talked about capacity and priorities and pressures within the team, but I do not recall an explicit conversation about an additional officer.
That could be correct. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way, because it's moved quickly in the last few weeks. And so what at that time could have been, we need more capacity, and I've taken that to mean an extra person. I don't know what it would be if it wasn't, but I may have put two and two together and made four, which I think extra capacity is an extra person, but you may be right that it wasn't actually said.
I think you put two and two together and got six, because there were two things that we needed to establish before we went anywhere. And I did get the rescoping, I did read it, and I forwarded it to Keane. At the time, I felt that had jumped further than we had actually done at the meeting, that we'd actually agreed at the meeting and we'd actually discussed. I felt it was, there were two things. We need to know. We can't do anything until we know whether we've got that land. Everything else is absolutely pointless until we've got that.
When we had complete agreement, that's word for word. I've got back to the same meeting. We're both at the same meeting now. Now, as far as I know, both the knowledge of the land, which I'm not going to say any more in a public meeting, as far as I know, that is coming along. And as far as I know, and I'm quite happy to change it to, we had said, and Philip had said, we can't do it without extra capacity.
But surely that is a decision. The reason why we have the working party is for the working party to make that decision that we need to look at capacity when we have the answer to the questions that that Philip's going to get us. It isn't something that should be on the P&R agenda tonight. It should be something that we decide to put on the P&R agenda after our next working party. This seems to me like you're jumping the gun very quickly, and without discussing this at the next meeting.
I'm just turning along the agenda to the capacity item.
We didn't discuss. We discussed the capacity, and you had a sideways conversation with Philip. I don't mean sideways on, where you were asking him. He was obviously producing some report for you about officer capacity at the moment. Did I pick that up right? Philip? Yeah, at the meeting. So he was providing you with the report on officer capacity, but that wasn't in relation to the cattle market. That was in relation to generally what is going on within the council at this moment in time. Again, am I correct on that point, Philip? Is that what he was? There was a report there coming on that.
Through the chair, if this is okay. Yeah, there is a more general report being prepared for the September Policy and Resources Committee, looking at resources across a number of departments within the authority. In terms of this particular one, again, I don't think it was explicitly discussed, but I think from an officer perspective, recognising members' aspirations to get this moving as quickly as possible, we are short on capacity, hence the reason the paper's been brought this evening. That was the reason for the report this evening. But I do take the point about it's been brought on the intention of trying with best endeavours to get a project moving forward that members see as a key priority.
I think that there is no point having one meeting of a working party and then bringing stuff to P&R without actually going back to the working party. And
just look, Claire, at the recommendations. Note that the additional budgets will be used, and unfortunately this was done in a hurry. The additional budgets were used to support the 3 posts below, and as a further report will be brought to cover funding for future years. I think that probably needs an NB to it, that clearly, if the cattle market is not going to proceed, and I'm not putting anything in the public domain more than that, then this post will not be needed to be filled. However, the alternative to that is to have a meeting of the working party and then on the 30th of September bring it back to P&R to say we need a project officer. And you bring it back to P&R on the 30th of September saying we need a project officer. We're going to get a project officer at some time in November, by which time the working party is going to be saying, if it's still proceeding, what do we do here?
I'm sorry, this seems as though you've taken something from the working party and you're running with it without going. I understand that we would need an officer, but we don't need to start recruiting an officer now for a project that might not happen without not discussing this with the working party. You should be saying to get another meeting of the working party and saying, we want to do it. This seems to me it's like you're just jumping the gun without discussing it.
That we need to run things in parallel here. Because if we don't run them in parallel, we'll be having P&R meetings coming out of our ears. Because every time the Livestock Working Party meets, it then goes, oh, that decision's got to go back to P&R, which it does. P&R is, the Working Party is not a decision-making body. It is recommending. And I'd taken, and if that's my fault, I apologise, capacity mean an extra officer. That is why I sent them. No, that's what I took it as. And on that basis, we couldn't proceed unless we'd got the land and we'd got the officer. Now, we can't, there's no point if the land isn't secure in getting the officer, and that's the amendment that might need to be made to the recommendation on page 45. Because I agree totally with that logic, that there's absolutely no point in employing a project officer if a project we're not doing. But that doesn't mean that when we get another week down the track or another fortnight down the track, we then will have to have another P&R. So I think that should be in there, subject to the cattle market project proceeding, and in consultation between the director and then Philip's long title and the chair of P&R. Have you got a note of that, Simon? Because we're trying here to run things in parallel rather than have a meeting every week. Are we there, Claire? I've seen, I'm just... Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Now we ascertained that it wasn't actually discussed at the working party, and I can't understand why it wasn't discussed there.
What wasn't discussed?
The issue of specifically employing a member of staff.
No,
We've set
the
up...
issue, no, I'm sorry, I won't take it wasn't discussed. I'm saying we've heard different things.
Well, okay.
Capacity was discussed. Capacity was on the forward plan.
Okay.
That you, hang on, capacity was on the forward plan that you forwarded to me, and that capacity included what we've got later in the paper.
The point I was trying to make is, okay, 4 people who were there said it wasn't discussed. One person is saying it was discussed. There's clearly ambiguity. However, on this issue, we've had minutes. I have no problem with the minutes. Fair enough. But there was a proposal for a post that's come out of nowhere as far as I can see, and I'll talk about it when we get there because we're not on that item yet, that seems to be jumping ahead and superseding the view and the judgment of the Livestock Market Working Party, this committee and council. We decided as a council, the last time council had a view on this, is that we would look at this further. It was not that we would do any particular course of action, pursue one avenue, A, B, C, D, that we'd look at it further. That is what the working party is doing. If the working party came to a judgment, which was we need extra capacity and extra resource, we want to take this forward, it should then come to this committee, potentially, then to council to say, we're now back on with this project, we want to proceed with this project, and we want the extra capacity and resource to be able to do it. As far as I can see, there is no council decision other than we look at this further. Not that we will do it, look at it further. And you could make an argument that extra capacity is there to allow us to look at it further. But we did commission a very expensive consultants report. Other people who were on the council at the time will remember this. I think the figure was around £50,000. It brought us no further forward. Now, I can say more about the actual officer at the time. This is about the procedure. And I don't think it's right that we've got the minutes of this working party on here, where that specific officer role was not discussed, we think, ambiguous, should I say, and where we've now got a separate proposal for capacity outside of the paper, which is on the forward plan for capacity, coming to the next meeting. So it seems to be a little bit the wrong way around, and that is why I asked the question, was it actually discussed? I was told yes, now I've been told yes by you, no by everybody else. So I don't know, but it just seems to be the wrong way around to have done this, and seems to be slightly premature given this council has not decided to do anything other than look at it.
Councillor Andrews.
I think, you know, I'm getting fed up with this. I think we've spent a long time arguing previously, Councillor Duncan has, about how we must be pragmatic. And now you are trying to be pragmatic, and we're having the opposite argument. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure that the officers wouldn't have brought this report forward unless they thought it was necessary. And I really think this discussion should come to an end. All we're being asked to is to approve the working party report. Questions have been asked. Those questions have been answered. They may not have been answered satisfactorily. They may have been answered satisfactorily, but it's done. Can we move on, please?
Are we all happy with that, or somebody wanting to have another? Councillor Arnold. Oh yes, rude not to.
I fully understand Claire. Okay, fully understand it, and I don't remember it being discussed. But I would be quite happy to see somebody employed with justification. Mm. At the present moment, we do not have justification in my mind. Mm. But the other but is, if it got to go up to another P&R and another council, we're delaying what's going to happen with the livestock market. So I'm a bit stuck in the middle, really, to be honest. I'd be happy to say, yes, we'll have somebody, but not yet, until we think it's justified. Because it's not at the moment.
And I have suggested, we'll be onto it in a week's time at this rate, that the proposal for a project officer is subject to the recommendations that we're going ahead with it. because otherwise you end up with a ludicrous situation of no project and a project manager. But we either decide it tonight on that basis, because I don't understand the capacity between capacity and a post, but there we are, right? We either decide it tonight, or in a week's time we'll be having another P&R to decide it. And I'll just give people this thought. It's taken 3 years, I think, to get nowhere. And now we've got the problem that we've got 18 months, and if we haven't got there, 18 months top whack. If we haven't got there, we won't get it.
I still don't think we can decide now to employ somebody.
And I'm suggesting that we decide now to employ somebody if the cattle market is going ahead.
When?
Sorry?
But when?
Well, hopefully we will know about the land fairly soon.
I just don't think we should be doing it and without it being discussed at the working party. I think
the working party meets when? When have we got the working party meeting, Claire?
It meets, Councillor Clark, when you decide it meets as chairman.
No,
you can
no,
call a
no,
meeting when you want to
it's
call a
not.
meeting.
No, those dictatorship days have gone.
It's 16th of August.
Councillor Clark, again, dictatorship days, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to the fact that we've got the livestock market at 6:30 on the 16th of Monday, and that's not my decision. That was a decision made by the Livestock Working Party. So it's not when I decide it.
I feel we live under more of a dictatorship now than we ever have.
Therefore, if we say we will employ somebody at the next meeting, we can do that, providing we've got the answers to the questions we want.
Yes, but that
Is Claire happy
working party, Steve, cannot decide to employ somebody. So we can decide tonight that if it is decided to go ahead with the cattle market, then we've got a post and have decided to go ahead with it. I realise it's running two things in parallel, but if we don't do that, we're not going to get there.
We're on the minutes, aren't we, Councillor Clark, at the moment, to receive the minutes. So I think I would like us to receive the minutes. I have no problem with the minutes. And get to the item when we get to it on capacity.
Well, I have a problem with the minutes, but I'm not going to start that discussion again. And as we're just noting them, it's quicker to just note them. Pardon? Yes. Yes, I think that's sensible, Claire. Can we switch the live stream off for 5 minutes? Can you tell us? Are we live? Lovely, thank you. We're now on to item 11, urgent business. I have no items of urgent business unless anybody's, any officer is waving at me, but I have a request for one item of urgent business. And the request I have got, which I'm happy to let the committee decide on whether we take as an item of urgent business. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to dictate on it.
So, Mr. Chairman, point of order, sure, is if you decide in your consideration that this is an item of urgent business, it's not for the committee to decide. We're either taking it as an item of urgent business because you've decided, or we're not.
And my decision will depend on the will of the committee. Straightforward and simple. Right. The council resolves, I received this as a request, the council resolves to instruct solicitors who are experts in dealing with applications for judicial review to obtain a legal opinion from leading London council in regard to a possible legal challenge of the decision to restructure local government in North Yorkshire.
No.
Somebody said no? Somebody said no? I don't think we should.
Chair, can I
Hang on a second, Paul, hang on a second. I'm just going round the room first. No for you. Definitely no. Definitely no. No. Oh, this is better. We're moving on in agreement, even if it's all negative agreement. No. 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 The floor's yours, Paul. I'm open to persuasion, but I will be guided by the committee.
I'm not.
Well, Chair, that's fine. Your minds are closed before we've even heard the argument.
Paul, just give us the reasoning as to
so I'm
why
not talking
you
to you. I'm talking to the person who shouted across at me.
Paul, can we address the comments?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I just check who shouted where? Sorry.
Can we please address comments through the chair? Carry on, Paul, please.
Right. We haven't. We've had the decision on the local government review. That decision was not what we wanted. We haven't discussed that decision. We haven't had an opportunity to discuss that decision, and we haven't had an opportunity to decide whether or not we accept that decision. And in order to decide whether or not to accept that decision, it ought to be, as a matter of due diligence, the practice to get a legal opinion from an authoritative source as to whether or not we would, if we wanted to, pursue an action for judicial review. And there are lots of things that I'm sure that those of us who've looked at this decision will have noted about it that we find it difficult to accept. For example, there's a paragraph that says, the Secretary of State noted that the population of Council is just over the range of the population size set out in the invitation for applying for a revision of the Council, just over the population size. I think the population size of North Yorkshire is about 600,000, and I can't quite remember what the invitation said, but I'm not sure it was 400,000 or 500,000. But that is described as just over the range of the population size. Now, people will say that.
Can I? Sorry for interrupting you, Paul, but all I'm asking now is to whether or not we debate what you're now debating later on. And I haven't heard any reasons as to why we should. I'll give you a couple of sentences, top whack, and then I'm going to ask the committee to advise me which way to go on this.
Right, Chair. The reason is if you want the opportunity to challenge the decision, you have to take it within, I think it is, 6 weeks. So therefore, if this council is going to get a legal opinion, so that the council can then, all members can then later decide whether or not to do anything about it, the decision has to be taken now. If the council wants to leave it as it is. That's up to the council. And I would say this is a matter of democracy. Why shouldn't the residents of, say, Scarborough have the right to run their own local services? Why shouldn't the residents of Harrogate have the right to run their local services? And why shouldn't the residents of Rydale have the right to run their own local services? If you feel about democracy, then you will support what I'm saying. And you will get that opinion, and you will then put it before when you've got that opinion, put it before the council, and the council can then make a decision. But unless you make that decision now, you have lost the opportunity, and you have lost. You will not be able to make a fully informed judgment as to whether or not to accept the decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I think you've already commented, Steve, but go on quick.
I just want to ask Councillor Andrews how much it's going to cost this.
No,
and is
I'm not going there. I'm going to ask you all, those in favour of me taking this as an item of urgent business. Those against me taking it as an item of urgent business. And that was
Chair, I believe there was one member who didn't vote. That was 8 votes against.
right.
Sorry, 9 votes, Chair.
9 votes. 9 votes against taking it. I think that's clear advice, in which case I will not be taking it. Thank you. We now move on to item 12, which is changes to the independent working party's appointments. I don't think that is anything other than for us to agree, because it is up to them who they have in their working parties and or whatever. So I move we agree those recommendations, unless there's anybody wanting to add or change anything.
Chair, just to point out, on item little 2, what is actually happening is Councillor Thackeray is not replacing Councillor Burr. Councillor Thackeray is replacing Councillor Andrews, and the reason why he's replacing me is because I automatically have a place on that working party as chair of planning. I think Simon will confirm that.
Have we received an amendment to this, Simon?
The details published on the agenda are those that Councillor Burr provided. It is true that Councillor Paul Andrews is on the local plan working party as chair of planning committee, so I don't know if he's now moving an amendment to what's on the agenda before we agree it.
The amendment has to be to appoint Councillor Thackeray as substitute on the local planning party in replacement of Councillor Andrews, and that is on the understanding, as I've said, that I'm already there as chairman.
Well, it's up to you who you have on there. Are you already on there?
Yeah, I'm on there because I'm chair of planning.
So why would Councillor Thackeray... Oh, so Councillor Thackeray would be substituting when you couldn't make it?
No. I'm sorry.
Councillor Thackeray as a substitute under the local working plan party in replacement of Councillor Andrews, you said?
No, I'm sorry. I apologise. I've got it completely wrong. It should be as it is there. Please accept my apologies.
So what's down here is...
I've misread it.
What down here is right then?
Yes.
Well, that simplifies that, at least another notch forward, in which case those in favour of the recommendations on item 12.
That's unanimous, Chair.
That's unanimous. Lovely, thank you. Milton Rooms, page 23.
Am I okay to briefly introduce this paper, Chair?
Yes, I was just about to ask you, Philip, will you?
Right, yeah, certainly. Thank you very much. I think this topic and this issue is fairly familiar to most members. I think papers around the Milton Rooms have been to this committee on a number of previous occasions. The purpose of this report is to seek agreement to changes to the previously agreed grant of £190,000 agreed by the authority. And the second purpose is to set out the business case and seek approval to the allocation of a further £307,000 with that amount previously agreed by the Council. Members will see there are two recommendations within the report which basically reflect the two purposes. So recommendation 1 is around agreeing the proposed changes to the 193 scheme previously agreed by Council, and secondly that approval is given to release £307,000 of additional funding in line with the submitted business case. In terms of the report sets out the context, the importance and the role of the Milton Rooms as a key cultural venue for Malton and also for the wider Rydale area. The report outlines the work of the Milton Rooms Working Party, talks about the strategic fit of these proposals against the council plan and cultural priorities, and highlights the great work that's been undertaken by Milton Rooms trustees over the recent and the more extended period of time. At section 6 of the report on page 25, it restates the fact that £193,000 was previously agreed by the authority, and then actually sets out a number of changes or amendments that have been requested by the Milton Rooms trustees to reflect the ring fencing of the further amount by the authority. So as I say, those changes set out on page 25 towards the bottom of section 6 of the report. In terms of the originally agreed £193,000, the trustees of the Milton Rooms want to basically continue with £136,000 worth of the original proposals, but seek amendments totaling around £56,000. And as I say, those proposals set out on page 25 and then on to page 26 of the report. Members will then move on to page 27 of the report, which sets out the business case for seeking a further £307,000 of funding. The details of those specific proposals set out on page 27 and then going on to page 28. And if members want more detail, that further detail is set out at Appendix A. Obviously, this is a significant amount of money and investment for the authority, and it's clearly important that benefits are achieved and outputs are actually generated for that investment. So basically, at section 6.14, the benefits of the council's investment are set out for members to review and no doubt comment on. So in summary then, as I say, this is quite a familiar topic that's been to this committee on a number of previous occasions. So recommendations are around the agreement of the amendments to the original £193,000 of funding and to seek approval and consent to allocate the further 307 against these specific proposals in the paper and the details set out in the business plan provided by the Milton Rooms trustees. So leave it there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Philip? Must be the way you tell them, Philip. It's very impressive. Right, I'll open it up to debate. I will move it with the following no, I've covered that one. I was wondering about full council, etc., and we made a decision at full council that we could decide today. The only tiny problem is we are changing a decision that was made by full council in February, which is less than 6 months ago. Now, on that basis, if councillors have given us the permission to go ahead and do it, I would suspect in constitutional terms we're all right with it.
Yes, Chair, I think council's delegated authority to for P&R to take the decision tonight. Some of that, as you say, is revisiting the original work scheme that was approved, but because council gave the delegation, it's effectively allowed P&R to revisit that decision.
Thank you. I'm happy in constitution terms and that. Has anybody got anything to add, or can we approve it? Chris?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, actually, initially when this was discussed at full council and there was a sum of £500,000 sort of ring fence for this, I wasn't entirely convinced. I'm not supportive of just handing out blank cheques. If somebody asks for £500,000 or £1 million, you know, what's the justification? But I have to say I'm extremely impressed with this report that the Milton Rooms have put together. You know, for the 2 or so years that I've been on this council, it's been one of the things that we've asked for and always said we want a business case, we want detailed proposals, and you know, looking through this, they've gone above and beyond. There's some real work gone into this with some, you know, financial details, which, you know, as a council, we have a document now to hold the Milton Rooms to account and actually say, well, has the money been spent as was specified? So, yeah, I just say, I think I'm really impressed with the document and best of luck to the Milton Rooms. And I think for a long time, myself and many other members have said we're willing to support it. We just need to see something like this that we can work with. Excuse me. So, yeah, happy to support it. You know, very impressed with the work that the Milton Rooms have put in and wish them every success. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Paul? Oh, sorry, I kept on you.
Last Chair, I don't know how many years this has gone on. Ever since I've been a councillor, we've been the Milton Rooms has been asking for money. And we've pinched and we've found every single excuse we could possibly find in order to stop them from doing some perfectly good work. And at last, we've seen sense. It's a great pity that it has taken so long.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
I don't think it's just a question of seeing sense. I think it's a question of seeing a very, very good and detailed business plan. And I think I have every faith in the management committee. Thank you.
Claire, and apologies.
Sorry, I'll second what Councillor Graham says. I think, you know, it's under new direction, under new management, the new committee at the Milton Rooms. It's a very professional job they've done. It's fantastic to see them supporting it. And I think this is going to be a great legacy project for Rydal District Council, and delighted to support it.
Thank you. Darren.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to pay tribute to the Management Committee and the trustees of the Milton Rooms for pulling this together. It is a great change in the way things have happened in the Milton Rooms in the past, and it shows a really solid basis for the work that they want to do. I agree with Councillor Andrews, this is so long overdue, and I'm sure all the public out there that are listening to this will be absolutely delighted that they're finally going to sort out those disgusting toilets. But I just think, yeah, we have to do this. It will be a great legacy project for this council for when we're no longer here. It's long overdue. Bring it on, the sooner the better, really. I'd also like to pay tribute, I think, to those many council members. I think we have all at some point, those more long-standing members, been on the Milton Rooms Committee at one time or another, and have tried and have tried and have tried. But I think we're finally there, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. So, yes, I wholeheartedly support it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Right, I'll add my tuppence halfpenny worth. I think it strikes me as very positive and pragmatic, where they're going clean the floor, and that's presumably industrial cleaning, etc., and cancel the existing ramp has been modified by volunteers. So they're not trying to squeeze every penny out of it, they're trying to get every penny out of it. And I think that is absolutely the right approach. I would like to thank Councillor Ryby for giving me a thought, which I've built on over the 2 years since he threw it out. If you've got a 900 and however many year lease it is now, you own it. Because in 700 years from now, when you've still only got another 150 years of lease to run, you still own it. So if you're going to own it for the next 700 years, you might as well treat it as your own. And I'm not convinced this council has treated it as its own over that period of time. And I'm grateful to do that. There is one little level of optimism in here that I don't believe, and it is so minor, but it's worth commenting on. it's on page 27, 612. The circuit is, and this is for the main hall audio line array sound system. This circuit is very lucrative, big performers and bands, etc. The line array system offers superb sound quality and future-proofs the Milton rooms for the next 30 years. If you go back 30 years from now, and what's happened to sound and transmission and everything else in those 30 years, how you've got a hope in proofing anything for more than 10 is pushing it. But I think if that's the only criticism I've got in this lot, it's a smile rather than a serious comment. So on that basis, I propose the officer's recommendations. We've got that, haven't we? Yeah, that's done and seconded. Thank you, Paul. Right, those in favour?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. I understand that the Section 151 officer had something to add.
Ah, sorry.
Yes, sorry, and can I just check? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just want to add something. It's nothing controversial, and it'll be the usual financial cryptic conversation. I just want members to note that that by voting for this, this is not considered to be a subsidy. Now that's important because you will remember something called state aid, which ended after Brexit, but we have something called subsidy control, which took its place. And so we have to just be careful how we deal with giving large sums of money to other organisations. So we have done an assessment with legal services, and they've confirmed that this is not a subsidy. It's just important that I note that for the record, in case someone were to ask at a later date. I hope that's okay and it makes sense.
I'm grateful for you for that comment, Anton, but they'd have me to argue with that spending 500,000 on our, and I've just said it, own building, is whoever's managing it for us is a state subsidy or whatever the modern post-Brexit phrase. But if common sense and legal opinion in the same direction, I suggest we'll note it and leave that bit happily.
Thank you.
Right, fine. Anything more on that? No? So we voted on it, haven't we? No, we need to vote on it. Those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Oh, back into the choppy waters. Additional capacity funding, item 14, page 45.
Again, am I okay to start, Chair?
I'm going to move an amendment first, Philip, and I would like your comments on the amendment. And I've put here NB after the bullet point in 2.1, which is the recommendation. NB, the proposed post for the livestock, project management post for the livestock market is dependent on the decision to proceed. So if we don't decide to proceed because of the points of the livestock market thing, then we don't do this post. Right, Philip.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't know if Councillor Duncan was raising an issue before I started.
Just, Councillor Carter, we usually take questions and then something's proposed and seconded and then someone moves an amendment and that's seconded.
Yes, and I'm covering what we've already had discussion on. Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, clearly there's been some debate, but I will kind of comment and present the report as currently drafted, obviously the amendment being noted. So the purpose of the report is to highlight an aspiration or proposal to put in place additional resources in the short term to boost capacity in the economic development and planning teams, and that any continuation of those resources will be subject to a further report around capacity to be brought to committee in September. The recommendations are as drafted, and clearly, Chair, you've mentioned there a potential amendment to one of the recommendations. In terms of the specifics of the report highlights the need for additional resource to make timely progress on the livestock market, and also a requirement for additional resource in the planning development management team to deal with a significant increase in planning application workload, and also to ensure that resource is not diverted from the local plan process. The report goes into proposed costings around the additional resource and the duration of posts, and it also makes some commentary with regard to the consequence of not filling those posts. There is then, Chair, financial implications set out on page 48 of the papers in terms of the current financial year and potentially in future financial years. And also again at page 48, the report highlights that a further report will be required to be brought to this committee and to council in terms of longer term funding for these posts. And if that funding would not to be agreed, then the potential mitigation measures to be put in place around that. So obviously there's been prior debate on this one, Chair, but in terms of my presentation introduction, I'll probably leave it there.
Thank you, Philip. Right, any questions to Philip?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. my question really is sort of several parts to it, but is how many people do we currently have in the economic development team? How many people do we currently have in the planning team? And how many people did we have in those two departments, let's say, a year ago, 2 years ago?
Right, Fief. In terms of the development management part of the planning team, Councillor Duncan, we have 4.6 to be entirely accurate people in the development management team. In terms of the economic development team, sorry, apologies, counting on my fingers. We've got 5 people in that team at the moment, and we're carrying 2 vacancies. In terms of where we were a year ago, in terms of the planning team, it was about the same. In economic development, we were up to full complement. As I say, we're carrying 2 vacancies at this moment in time.
Just on that, Philip, obviously, you mentioned those 2 vacancies there within the economic development team, which perhaps is some reason why you might be struggling with delivery of all the projects, even before we consider this additional post. Obviously, the reason why I asked the question is my understanding, and it may well be naming and semantics, but that roughly 2 years ago, or at least when you came into post, there was no economic development team in existence, as far as I understand it. So when you came into post, which was roughly just before, I think, May 2019, we did not have an economic development team. We've now got a team of 5 or 6 people with 2 vacancies. So I thought that was important just to highlight that. And in terms of planning, obviously you mentioned there was 4.6 in development control.
Yes.
And is there any vacancies in that team? And also, how many additional people is there now than there was this time, let's say, last year?
Right, okay. A number of points there, Councillor Duncan. Let me try and remember them. If I do apologise. In terms of economic development, we're carrying 2 vacancies, but they are very specific vacancies, one for a climate change officer and one for a business support officer. So they are not generic project management posts. They're very specific to particular areas of work. You are quite right to say that when I started, basically there was there was one part-time officer in economic development, nothing more than that. So the council's been incredibly supportive to me as an individual and to the economic development agenda in terms of the resources that are being provided. But the consequence of that resource is that we now have a very demanding work programme and a huge set of priorities that are reflected in the council and the corporate plan. In terms of the planning department, say 4.6 people in the development management team. There currently is one further post that has been agreed by council that is being recruited to at this moment in time. I think the big challenge in the planning team is the fact that we've seen an absolute explosion of planning application workload. I think there's some figures quoted in the report there. We've seen almost a doubling in the inquiry numbers and at least a 25% increase in terms of inquiries coming through to us. So yes, there is some capacity yet to be filled based upon a previous agreement for planning, but the workload we're facing is absolutely tremendous, and we want to avoid actually taking resource away from the local plan work into development management. We want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, thank you. And just widening that out just to Anton, the Section 151 officer, a similar kind of question, which is, in terms of budget spend on staffing, Anton, can you just take us back as to the current spending on staffing for this year in terms of the budget, maybe what it was last year and what it was the year before that?
Off the top of my head, the budget spending this year is looking pretty much on track at the moment, which I'll cover later on in the Q report. But as Philip says, there are a number of vacancies around, which is why I'm saying that funding for this year could be covered by those costs. So it's not requesting additional budget. In terms of the increase year on year, Council voted for 2021, I think, to increase the staffing budget by about £1 million. Then on top of that, due to COVID, we spent, again, I'm thinking off the top of my head, probably another sort of £400,000-ish. So last year, 2021, we spent £1.4 million compared with the year before. Then this year, I don't have the figures to date, but we are spending in line with the budget that was approved by Council in February.
So, Anton, just so I've got that right, even removing the additional COVID expenditure, in terms of, and this is staffing alone, I believe, is that right? Budget on staffing has increased in the past 2 years alone by £2.4 million.
If you add both years together, yes, but kind of on an annual basis, it's increased by about £1 million a year. Yeah, approximately.
Yes, I have a question. 2 years ago, staffing was low as a result of the IEASY staff reductions. Can you give me give an idea of what the profit or what the gain of the council was as a result of the dismissal of all those posts under the IEASY reorganisation? Just to give us a balance, because I mean, what I'm hoping you will see, Anthony, is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish a balance, because on the one hand, they're suggesting that we're overspending on staffing, but on the other hand, what I want to try and ask you is, what about the very low base that we started from as a result of the IEASY economies?
Through you, Chair, I can't give you in terms of the actual funding figures. What I can tell you is that the full-time equivalents at the start of this financial year, and that includes the increases that Council voted this year and the year before, the full-time equivalent number, and indeed the actual number, is pretty much exactly the same as it was in 2014 and 2015. It then dipped down significantly. So the figure of around 202 full-time equivalents dropped down to about 140 before going back up to about 202. So that's the information I have to hand at the moment.
Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? Just one comment to go with those questions. I think this is why we needed the capacity item on the agenda at the end of July, i.e. today, and it's now coming on the 23rd of September, because I think there's a lot of, how shall I put it, underlying questions in the questions that have been asked, but they can't be taken purely in isolation, because there's a lot of interesting history, and I think we underspent the budget by a couple of million 3 years ago, and at least 1 million of that underspend was lack of staff. So I think we do need to, and this is sort of for you to hear, Anton, we do need to get a broader picture on this lot when we do that capacity review. Right, Steve.
Many moons ago, we used to have a breakdown of staffing compartments, where they were.
Oh, yes.
And we did ask for one a while ago, and we didn't get a really proper one. And I think that would be a good idea for all members to see about who works where, which we don't have.
I've been asking for that right home to everybody in this organisation since March or whenever I ended up in this position. And I do know that Councillor Duncan has been asking for it for before that. And some of us were asking for it before that. So it really does need to be clarified for members. Claire.
Can I ask, and I may have heard this at some point and I've forgotten, but obviously we took on quite a lot of staff at the start of COVID, didn't we? Extra telephone staff and all the rest of it. What's happened there? At what point do we see their contracts coming to an end? At what's happened to the people that were employed for the COVID?
I can only answer Councillor Docker in terms of my own department. Certainly in terms of economic development and planning, we have just taken on one person for COVID-related activity, and the contract of that individual will be expiring in March 22. But that contract is actually funded by government funding. It's externally funded. We're very, very fortunate around that. I'm just not able to speak for the other departments, unfortunately.
And can I suggest it is unfair on Philip if he's here to get answers beyond the question's right. There's nothing wrong with the question.
I absolutely, I don't expect Philip to know the answer to that.
There's nothing wrong with the question, but
yeah,
it's why
I
we
wasn't
need
directing
the capacity thing.
Yeah. I just would like to know for myself what has happened and what were the costs incurred employing extra staff to get us through COVID, and as we're coming out of COVID and we're coming out, obviously the department that were handing out the business development, they're handing out the grants and all that sort of stuff. Extra people were taken on for that. What's their capacity now? The business grants have stopped going out. Yes. What are they doing? And I really don't want to seem that I am suggesting that they're not doing something, but I'm just saying what capacity has been reduced in the workload has been reduced as we are coming out of COVID. It's just I'm not being critical. I just would like to know.
You're underlining the questions, as I said, unwritten in here. Yes, Chris.
I was Chair, questions. Chair, sorry to interrupt. Anton's got his hand up. I don't know if he can assist with that question.
That. Anton, and then go to Chris.
Yes, thank you. It is just to respond to that question in particular. Again, in February, Council approved continuation of some of those staffing costs to do with COVID until the end of September. So at this current point in time, their contracts will end at the end of September, and that's potentially something to discuss in September itself, but that's the current position. Overall, Council agreed, the figure sticks in my mind, it was £787,000. Not all of that was staffing, but quite a large chunk of it was. But the place to look for that is in the budget report that went through Council in February.
And I think those posts ending in September was Councillor Duncan's question in relation to the forward plan a couple of meetings back. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I think my point probably follows on from what Councillor Docker said, that how much of this demand at the moment that we're seeing is actually potentially pent-up demand that may be alleviated in the short term. So a bit like, the NHS backlog that we see at the moment, because people maybe haven't been putting planning applications in for the last 6 months to a year. There's obviously a rush coming through at the moment, but it's very hard to predict how that will follow through over the next 12, 18 months. So appreciate that, there's a lot of staffing issues, but with people working from home, the people self-isolating, things like that, it may be potentially a short-term issue, that with a bit of ingenuity and prioritising, that we might be able to reassess that later down the line and see whether that is a long-term demand for that staff, because staff, you know, our staff do work extremely hard, like, you know, like everybody says, on a regular basis. But I think the increase that we've seen in the budget over the last couple of years, I think, is quite significant. And to follow on Councillor Andrews' point earlier, yes, we've probably started at a base, gone down, probably got back up to a level where we should have been. But I'd be reluctant at this, you know, delicate time, as things are changing quite rapidly, to commit to this high level of expenditure, additional expenditure. Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Sorry, could I just have clarification? We're getting something at the September meeting that is an overview of the staff that we have in the council.
It has been rumoured.
Okay.
I mean, we were getting it in July and we didn't, which would have been, in my opinion, very useful, but we may need another meeting for it. But I think it's a very important issue, this, that we need to do. And it is on the forward plan for September. Right, this has been moved and seconded, Simon?
No, it hasn't been moved and seconded yet, Chair.
I have moved it as with that amendment. Is it seconded? Right. I will speak to it later, so we can try and move on. Has anybody got anything to say in the debate? Councillor Duncan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think those plenary questions are quite useful because, obviously, as we've seen, even the past 2 years has been over an additional £1 million spent on staffing and staffing alone. That represents a significant number of extra posts which we didn't have. Plus, we had then additional COVID contingency funding with additional staffing posts as well, obviously due for review at the next P&R meeting. We've also heard from the officers in terms of the question, the total FTE, and I think that is the key number for us to consider. And you'll have heard that it dipped down to 140, it went back up to 202, I think it stands at the moment. That is similar to the staffing levels we had in 2014-15. That's when I joined this council. That's before we had the IEZ restructure. So in terms of number of FTE, we are back to where we were 6 years ago. Our actual revenue budget expenditure is somewhere in the region of that. I think actually the revenue budget is actually more than when I first joined this council 6 years ago. So we have had a significant amount of expenditure in terms of staffing. We obviously heard from Philip 2 years ago, maybe a bit more, and we didn't have at that stage an economic development department at all. We've now got a team of 5, 6, 7 people, if you include those vacancies. So this is all adding up, in my mind, to a picture of we have made significant investment this year and last year in terms of staffing. We set a budget and we expect our officers to use that budget in terms of staffing resource to deliver the priorities which we set. It does not work that we say we want to do this project and therefore the officers need to request us additional budget for a particular person. There is a budget, for example, for economic development, and that budget should be used and delivered to deliver the priorities of the council. We've heard, which I didn't know, there's 2 vacancies currently in that department, i.e. the budget is there already for those 2 people, yet they're obviously earmarked for 2 different departments than, for example, the livestock market. This would be an additional person on top of that. This is all adding up to a picture in my mind that there has been significant investment and that it is wrong to look at individual things like this in this way at this meeting to make those decisions. We've had that significant investment, and going back 6 years ago, I never heard Chief Executive, Senior Officer, or anybody else say, we can't do that because we've got a capacity issue. I can't recall anyone ever saying that, but that seems to be, at the moment, the only thing I'm hearing whenever anything is proposed. Any project we want to do, we may struggle with that due to capacity. That is the same thing repeated every single time. In terms of the livestock market project, we managed to engage consultants, questions over those consultants and the report they came up with, but we engaged consultants and we did get a detailed report back at a cost of around £50,000 to this council without not only a dedicated livestock market officer, but without an economic development team at all. Now you could say, well, nothing's happened, we haven't actually come to a conclusion, but we managed to do that and we engaged consultants to do it. Now we're asking, not only on top of the economic development team, we want additional officers specifically for that post. I don't think that's how that works. We've been very generous as members. We've put that investment in for the Chief Executive and senior officers to manage their teams to deliver our priorities. It is over to them, in my mind, to do that. And I can't support the additional investment that's been proposed at this point in time. I'd like to see it as part of the wider picture when we get the report at the next meeting. I'd also like to see a structure chart of every department, who is doing what, where, when, how much they're paid, the grades, etc. I'd also like to see a job description for the roles that are being proposed. And without that, I will not be able to support the proposal. I can't support it this evening. I might be able to support it next time. I'm doubtful, but I might be able to. But I need that piece of information. But do not let anybody say or anybody suggest that we don't have capacity in this organisation. We have the equal capacity now as we did 6 years ago. We should be able to deliver on the things we want to deliver as members. We should not have constantly the same explanation, there is not enough capacity. There's more capacity now than at any time when I've been on this council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ken. Anybody else? Paul?
I really get depressed when I hear the arguments of Councillor Duncan on this sort of thing. It's the same with the Conservatives in every council I've ever worked in. No, we don't want to pay a penny more than we have to, and it damages staff morale. It misunderstands what is happening. We've seen how we had that huge IEC reorganisation, which is the most destructive thing that the Conservative Party ever inflicted upon the staff of this council. It ruined the services, and I understand the officers are had great difficulty and made a huge effort to recover from that, and I think they deserve the credit for that. Yes, when it came to the cattle market, we had consultants. We've used the consultants. The consultants have gone. So what happens? If we have a choice, don't we? We either employ more consultants or we employ more staff. I mean, you can't get away from that. And then when it comes to planning, oh dear me. Well, there I am saying we must appoint consultants. Why am I saying we must appoint consultants? Because I say the planning department will get so busy that they won't have time to do the local plan. And what is happening? The planning department is getting busy. The officer quite rightly says, we don't want to get the local plan forward planning staff involved in development control. Absolutely right. But work is increasing. The sheer weight of the work is increasing. So what happens? It'll be all hands to the pumps, and people from forward planning will be delegated and asked to do things relating to development control. And then this council comes along and says, well, you can't have a consultant because you've got all the staff. The officers should be expected to do all that work. I think it's the language that I hear from Councillor Duncan, I think is absolutely appalling. It is the reason why over 2 years very little has been done about the forward plan. The reason is shortage of staff. The only conclusion I have is that because this council will not provide the resources, the best thing to do is to pay a consultant to do it. And here we are, arguing, penny pinching. The officers have given a view, and I think they should be. And I think that view should be respected, and it should be agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Claire.
Firstly,
mushrooming over this side.
Funny that. Firstly, I'd like to say that as a Conservative, yes, I think it is my duty to question the spending of the taxpayers' money, and I'm proud to do that as a member of the Conservative Party. That's, you know, I will always hold officers to account, and I think that's our duty. I don't think it's a bad thing, whichever party you are, to hold the officers to account and to justify where the money goes. I absolutely get the planning, that they need somebody in planning. I've read the figures and I can see it, and I think that's fine. I can't support you know, and I'm sorry, I can't support getting somebody for the cattle market at this point. I just, that isn't what we agreed. It isn't what was discussed, and I think it's too early. I think we're shooting the gun on it.
Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Docker has stole a little bit of my thunder there, as you probably expect. But just to quote Councillor Andrews, he said, the Conservatives don't want to pay a penny more than they have to. Well, absolutely, he's spot on. We don't want to pay a penny more than we have to. I mean, to me, that's just good financial sense, and so should every councillor. And he's right, yes, that we have a duty to our staff, but we do have a duty to the residents of Rydale to show some fiscal responsibility and ask tough questions. So, yes, I say this time and time again, but public money should be treated with the same scrutiny and respect that we spend our own individual money. So, Councillor Duncan highlighted it earlier. There are a couple of questions that he's asked and a couple of bits of information that he's requested. And if they come back, then yes, I can potentially be persuaded. But as it stands at the moment, I cannot support that. And I think every councillor needs to take on that fiscal responsibility and shouldn't just, I say willy-nilly, but shouldn't support something without the correct level of scrutiny just because it's what the Conservatives don't like. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Duncan?
It was just a short personal explanation, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, Councillor Andrews said that this was sending a message that damages staff morale. That may be his conclusion, but 75% of staff who voted in the recent staff champion poll did put their faith in me to be the champion of the staff. So I feel that there may be a slight mismatch between his interpretation and overall the faith that the council staff have put in me. And there has been, I say it again, very significant investment in staffing resource in, I think, almost every department in this council. To suggest otherwise is wrong.
Just one side comment on that, that maybe the opposition in the staff champion was useless, and it was therefore you got the 75% of the vote without any serious opposition. Joy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would have been really good to have had the structure of the council here. You know, yeah, I know we've said that. So, but I think that what your amendment is saying, as Councillor Docker said, she's looked at the planning thing, and we need that to be done. And what we're saying is we're not committing to getting a member of staff for the cattle market if the cattle market doesn't go ahead. So I think that covers that. If it doesn't go ahead, there won't be anybody employed to do that because there's no need for that. But we do need to employ somebody in the planning because we have a backlog, etc., and there is a need for it. So I think that point's covered. We're not spending something on staff that we don't need to.
Any more for any more? Paul?
Yes, Chair. Yes, I certainly am aware of the need for fiscal responsibility, and if anybody challenges the officers, I think the officers are probably get more irritated when me challenge them than anybody else. But the point is that on this occasion, the officers have produced a report which does actually make sense, which does contain sufficient information, and I cannot see why we should question it. Well, I don't know. I do think we should. There's every reason why we should question it. But as the officers have answered the questions, and I think on this occasion, we know the circumstances, we know the background, we know what happened in IEC, and we know we know the pressures that the council have been under recently, and we know that the officers
the ground
and the officer, we know the officers have done a good job, and we should accept the report.
Jane?
Could I propose, Mr. Chairman, I suppose it's an amendment, is that this item is deferred to the next meeting of Policy and Resources when it can be considered in the context of the wider capacity requests that officers are going to make for us. I think that would be a benefit to all members, because as I think everyone's raised, maybe exception of Councillor Andrews, things that they may have questions and queries about. And I think if we can consider this all as one, we would have a much better understanding. If I'm having to vote tonight, my answer is no. If I'm having to vote next time, my answer might be yes. It might be no, but it's a might be. Tonight, I can't support it. So I'd like to propose that it is deferred to the next meeting to be considered as part of the wider item. I don't know if I've got a seconder for that.
Can I suggest, before we take a vote on that, that we are in danger of wrecking things, because the planning ones are there, the need in planning is growing massively, and it's for this year, which we've only got half of it left. The cattle market one, I've taken on board what Claire said and said, let's park that, but agree it tonight. Unless we want another P&R in the second week of September.
No, I wanted P&R I want it to be deferred to the next meeting of P&R. That's my right to do that. It's been proposed.
Perfectly your right
it's
to do
been
it.
seconded.
That may be in the first week in September.
And I think it would help all members to make an informed decision that this item is deferred. And I'm saying to you, we can take it now, I can vote against it, but I actually want to have the information to be able to make a considered judgment.
You've had 3 goes, Paul. I think that's enough. Keane's had 3 goes as well. No, you're right, you haven't. I was hoping you wouldn't, but you will. Go on.
Yes, Chair. How many times have we sat in this room and listened to Councillor Duncan haranguing you for deferring things because that way they say Councillor Clark was ensuring that nothing would get done. And what are we facing here? We're facing Councillor Duncan. You know, the roles seems to have reversed now. You're the one who are pushing things on, and Councillor Duncan is the one who's pushing them back. I think, you know, in a way, if it wasn't so serious, Chair, it would be quite funny. I would oppose the deferment, Chair.
Is it on the amendment?
Yes.
Go on then.
I'm struggling with the fact that if we're going to delay the cattle market decision till the end of September.
So if that's the case, you vote against the
because
deferment?
I think it needs to be made before then, in August.
Right. Can we take a vote? Come on, let's take a vote on the deferment. Those in favour of deferring...
So just responding to the debate, Mr Chairman, I think it's just important to point out that, yes, there may well be a very good case in planning, but I want to remind members again how much investment we agreed in February, just this year, February, how much investment we put into the planning department to allow the fulfilment of the local plan. I was a leader of this council at the time. I was heavily involved in consultation with the chief executive and the finance officer, and I said, we need to move forward with the local plan. What investment is required for us to do that? A figure was stated, I agreed to it, we agreed to it as a committee, we agreed to it as a council. We're now told we do not have enough money, we need more. Again, economic development, a significant investment there. I have to make the case again that there may well be a case for this, but we've agreed in this financial year alone, in this budget, significant investment. And I want to know specifically what we didn't know then that we now know now. We've put all that money in, and I'm saying to you, I think a deferment would be a benefit to all members of this council so we can actually get to the bottom of what is going on. We should not be looking at 1 or 2 posts in 2 departments. We need to look at the bigger picture because our budget is growing and growing and growing. And as you will see on the later report, I think the estimation is that we're going to run out of money at some point very soon. I want to know what's going on. I think members need to know what's going on. And I'm proposing that we go to deferment. And on Councillor Andrews' point, when he's saying that the roles have flipped, when you propose a deferment, and I've said that I'm opposed to that, I would like to know a time, Councillor Clark, when you propose a deferment on something that I've opposed, because I can't think of one. I really can't. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
I'm not going to get dragged into that. Can we have a vote and those in favour of deferring this item? Those against deferring? Abstentions? Yeah. Jolly good. Well,
Chair, that's 4 votes for, 5 against and 1 abstention.
Right, okay. So can we now move straight to the vote on it as amended?
Mr Chairman, can I request a recorded vote, please?
No problem with that at all.
Chair, I can read the amendment if
Yes,
that would
please,
assist.
that'd be kind.
So the amendment is to add an NB to the recommendation that the proposed project management post for the livestock market is dependent on the decision to proceed.
Right, we do this on a called out names, do we? For a name vote, or do you just want to hold hands up?
We can do it with hands up, and I can make a note of how everyone's voted, Chair.
Whichever's easiest for you.
Yep.
Those in favour of the motion as amended by the decision to proceed? Oh, God. Used to be indecisive and now he's not so sure.
I've got that, thank you.
And those against? I was waiting for Ellen to wave at me that she'd got first look.
I've got those, Chair.
And the vote is, any abstentions? No? No.
It's 5 votes for and 5 against, Chair.
In which case, the officer's recommendation as amended stands. Thank you. Oh, tremendous. Treasury Management Annual Report, my favourite.
Thank you, Chair. I will deal with this as quickly as I can, just conscious of time. This is the annual report for the financial year 2021.
Thank you, Philip.
It sets out some of the assumptions that we made around treasury management rates and what the impact of that was. The main message to learn really was that interest rates, people will recall, actually took a cut early in 2021, and that continued for the full year. That did impact on the return that we had. However, it was offset to some extent by the large balances that we have, the large cash reserves. But overall, our outturn was down by £28,000 on expectations, and that fed into the outturn report, which members saw at a previous meeting. I don't really want to pick up anything else on it. We did bring a mid-year report that identified this direction of travel. The outlook is still uncertain for future years, but we'll see how that goes. But we have revised our assumptions down for 21-22 based on what happened last year. Happy to take questions. Sorry, I should also say this went to overview and scrutiny last night and was noted there too. Thank you.
Any questions to Anton? Well, I've got one, Anton. You'd be disappointed if I didn't have one on Treasury Management for you. We're investing in local authorities, and we're having a history of local authorities being taken over by the government, going bankrupt, whatever, for all the pressures that we all know and understand. And on that basis, should we be investing in local authorities, or is it a pool of local authorities, in which case if one goes down it's not so much of a problem to us? How does it work?
Yeah, it does work on that basis, Chair. Local authorities are subject to the same strict rules and guidance for any other investment bodies. So our treasury management team, as advised by our external advisors, we just need to keep watch of that. So yeah, we do spread the risk, but our investments tend not to be too exciting. I keep saying this, but anytime I bring you an exciting treasury management report, then there's a problem. Our investments tend to be stable and secure rather than exciting.
Thank you, Anton. And we're down to note this and approve the actual 2021 Prudential and Treasury indicators in this report. I move that. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Paul. Those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Revenue and capital budget monitoring, page 61. Anton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There are 3 parts to this report, and I'll deal with each in turn. The first part, firstly, some apologies that the report that you've got just purely down to timing in terms of when we've had to write the report and when the first quarter ended, which was the first week in July, effectively. So it says in there that I will bring a verbal update, which I will do. But I'll do that right at the end because I think the second part probably impacts on that. The second part, what we did manage to do, because we do this on a monthly basis, we do monitor COVID costs on a monthly basis, and we have to submit those to central government. Whereas, of course, the Q report is the actual quarter. So that second part from section 5.2 onwards sets out that, as we've referred to earlier, the council set aside £787,000 for COVID costs. A lot of that's to do with staffing, but not totally. Our estimates to date are that's pretty much spot on. There's a couple of small variances here and there, but we do expect to spend that money. The one area we're just watching is one of the biggest areas, loss of car park income. That, of course, is much smaller than the loss we incurred last year because the car parks are open and we are charging, but footfall has been down, and we'll just watch to see if that happens. So it may not be as bad as that, but we'll bring further updates on that as we go through the year. The third part of the report, as Councillor Duncan's already referred to, that sets out the impact on reserves, and I thought that was useful to bring to members. There's been some discussion at various meetings about where we are going with reserves, and on current trends, although our reserves effectively were 16.2 million, if you like, our usable reserves. A lot of those are earmarked, but at the moment we're showing a reduction to 5.4 million by next March. And then you can see what happens in a few years afterwards. Now, obviously, LGR will happen before then, so we will not get to March 24, never mind March 25, but I think that's still useful to see. And it's also, as I highlight, it makes a lot of assumptions, so I've simply used the budget gap that was in our financial strategy back in February for the next 2 or 3 financial years. That may change depending on funding and decision that members take next for next February, ahead of next February. But I think it does give a good indication. What it does show, that the big decrease in this current financial year does include a number of projects that are earmarked, but we haven't if you like, formally and totally approved yet. So, for example, the livestock market that we've been talking about, there's an assumption there that the £1.5 million will be used. There's also an assumption about the extra money going to that we set aside for Pickering and the Milton rooms, which we've just approved actually. So that 307 will come out. And of course, the capital programme, which I'll come back to in a minute. So the first part of the report is just an update on where we are. And the team has been working to try and get to a position for you. I did think, I took the decision, I hope this was okay, but I did think it was worthwhile bringing this report, even though it was incomplete, rather than wait to inform you in September in terms of how we're doing. So I hope that's helpful. But in terms of how we're doing, then we are on track. And I think I probably spoiled the surprise earlier when I mentioned this. We are on track. The one area where we are seeing pressures is within street scene. And again, that's been the case for some time now. We are doing some extra work in there to see whether those pressures will pull through into the full financial year. But otherwise, including the additional COVID costs, then the budget's in a break-even position at the moment. And that's what I'll show on the revenue budget when I do finalise this report. Now, this is a Part B, so the full finalised report will go to full council in September. But ahead of that, I, of course, will send it out to members of the committee so you can see the actual figures. But in terms of the revenue budget, it is on track. In terms of the capital budget, then that largely depends on some of the big projects that we have. And you can see from the reserves that we are expecting to spend over just on the kind of original and the capital carried forward from last year, over £6 million. So again, we will update you on that in due course. £2 million of that, for example, is to do with the starter units in Pickering, which I think you've noted will come back to PNR in September. So at this stage, the capital is dependent on how we get through those plans, or they may have to be carried forward into future years. But importantly, I think revenue budget is on track. Sorry, that's a really lengthy introduction, but I think probably necessary as the full report wasn't there in writing. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Anton? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Anton. Just one very quick thing, which was to note on this report around reserves level. Obviously, the prediction that that's going to dip into the negative, or at least leave us in quite a vulnerable position, even before we cease to exist as an authority, as is expected. And we're going to be down significantly on the amount of reserves that we've got access to in case of, for example, unexpected costs, an emergency situation, potentially further COVID costs, the costs of reorganisation, which we've got to contribute towards. There is nothing in here that I can see which is significant identification of savings, significant identification of resource management, reduction of expenditure in particular areas. What plan is there to make sure that we are not only going to blow all the money that we've got and leave the new council with nothing, but leave ourselves in a vulnerable position by way of potential service continuity if something unexpected happens? And it's okay to say that it's not going to, but for example, we had the COVID situation, which we never could have foreseen 2 years ago, for example. So it is quite worrying looking at this report, the scale of the expenditure, looking forward from here. Is there a plan to identify savings and try and keep ourselves in the black?
Yes, there is. And the first part of that will be the financial strategy that comes to members into this committee in September. So already started work on that. A key thing there, Councillor Duncan, is you'll see that potentially coming out next year is in the strategic reserve 1.2 million, 1226. That is the overspend, if you like, the deficit that we showed in the financial strategy, were we to do nothing. And obviously that's the first area we'll tackle. If we have a balanced budget next year, then we won't need that 1.2 million. So that would put 1.2 million back into the pot. So that's just one example. But what I'll need to build into here are expected costs that RIDO, like all councils, will have to pick up to fund LGR. Which is a discussion you all have views on, but we will be expected to contribute towards that. So that's something from the other side. So again, sorry, it's been a long day and that's a long answer. But the plan is that I'll bring you something in September, and particularly as we get ready for setting the budget for the final financial year for this council. 22-23. I'm very happy to meet with groups and as well as members as a whole in workshops and whatever to discuss that in more detail.
Thank you, Anton. I appreciate that. Just one very quick thing, which is obviously, as far as I understand it, the biggest, you mentioned about the revenue budget and trying to get that balanced. There is, I think, if I've understood correctly, that deficit of 1.2 million pounds, which is still going to be there, which means we have to take corrective action of 1.2 million pounds. The biggest source of expenditure for us is staffing, and obviously, as far as I can see, the only way is up on that one rather than downwards. So I'm just wondering, obviously, if it's coming as part of that financial strategy document and the capacity funding, will there be identification in there of a reduction in staff expenditure, or will there only be increases, do you think?
I think we'll have to look at all. I would be failing if I didn't present you with different scenarios, and so inevitably that will look at savings across the organisation, and also the impact of doing that. And then members will need to take a choice as to whether to continue to fund those from reducing reserves or not. But yeah, nothing's off the table.
Anybody else? Questions for Anton? Oh, thank you, Anton. I move that we accept the recommendations on the two budget items. The contents of the report include updated verbally at the meeting and notes the impact on reserves. Those two things, 2.1, 1 and 2. Is that seconded? Thank you. Anybody got anything to put into the debate? Lots of shakings of heads. That'll do. But I've nothing to add at all. Thank you very much, Anton. Superb, but I think the main decisions and the main looking at this lot going to be in September when we're going down the how do we go from here position. Lovely. Yeah. Thank you, Anton. Right. Next item on the agenda, I think, is Emma. Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry. Well spotted, Paul. Those in favour of the recommendations as moved and seconded? I must have assumed it was going to be that, Paul.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Right. HR policy, item 17, HR policy revision, government pension scheme, discretions, family leave policy and probation. Emma?
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. Thank you. We have 3 policies for your consideration this evening. The first one is the employer discretions policy, of which I'm actually going to hand over to Marie Lomax, my colleague on this one, who has had the joy of putting this one together. So I'll just hand over to Marie for this one and I'll take over for the second 2 policies.
Good evening, this is Marie speaking. Discretions policy. Brief introduction. This is something that we legally require to have, and through the legislation we have to actually set out what we must do in certain circumstances that may happen during the pension scheme. This policy is normally actually used by the pension scheme itself, so that there's consistency, so that we apply this equally to everybody. The policy looks quite complicated. When you actually look at the table itself, the first 4 columns are legislation. The 5th column is saying what we will or won't do in those circumstances. Basically, it comes down to a very simple premise. If we say we will do something, it will cost us as an organisation money. If we say we won't, it doesn't. We've taken a lot of actually background research on this, and our policy is very much similar to NYCC's. The bits that we differ is where we already have existing policy, i.e. our redundancy policy and our flexible retirement. Anything that actually encroaches on that, we have stuck totally to what is already in those policies, as they have not been updated. If you have any further questions, I'll try my best to answer. If they are too complicated and pensions related, I will actually get back to you with an answer.
Any questions for Marie? I've got one, Marie, and I'm sorry for this, and I'll quite happily accept an answer later. But on the, it says if it comes at a cost, are you saying there's no additional cost to Rydale, or there is an additional cost? But the let-out clause is probably that cost will not come until Rydale Council is closing its doors.
The timing of this policy is interesting. It will come as a cost to whatever council if we say we are going to actually sort of let a discretion and we're going to approve it. There are very few that we've actually, I don't think we've said yes to anything.
So the cost is going to be pretty small in your opinion?
Yes, it is.
Lovely, thank you. Right, it is, any other questions from anybody? Anything for debate? It is recommended, Council, that the revised policies are agreed. Now, on the local government pension scheme discretions, is that agreed? Because I'll do it one by one through. Those in favour? Thank you. I think
It's unanimous, Chair.
I think that was unanimous. We now move on to the next one.
So the next policy for your consideration is the family leave policy. This is quite a large policy now. It amalgamates a number of different policies around maternity, paternity and adoption. We've tried to streamline this as much as we possibly can rather than have various lengthy documents. It is very legislative heavy in terms of our obligations as an organisation and as an employer, and is very much in line with the Green Book. Does anybody have any questions on this particular policy?
No, another room full of non-questioners. Right, I will move the Council, the revised policy on family leave policy. On family leave policy, the revised policies that are agreed for implementation recommended to Council that the family leave policies are agreed. Those in favour? Thank you. Sorry, Di.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Nearly had half a vote there, I think. And the third one is the probation policy. Is that you again, Emma?
Yes, it is, Chair. So this policy is a new policy looking at supporting procedures within the organisation to manage the probationary period in a more substantial way. Managers have a clearer understanding, as do employees, of expectations during that probationary period. Does anybody have any questions on this particular policy?
No questions? No? Right, so I'll move the same motion for this policy. Di seconded it, thank you. Open to debate, anybody want to say anything? No, Paul's ahead of me this time. He's trying to vote, and I haven't asked for a vote. Right, I've one comment to question to, or comment to make, Emma, or statement, really. It says at the end, page 130 on this probation, after it's been to appeal, this decision shall be final. Now, I realise that's only on probations, but it's quite good when you have an appeals committee when the decision is final. Thank you. Right. Those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And I think, painful though it's been, that's the end of it. Any other chairman decides urgent and you advise the chair not to take it as urgent, so he didn't. Lovely. Thank you. Safe journey home, everybody.